Good morning and welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting for January 23rd, 2018. Madam Clerk.
Today we have two closed session agenda items. Number one, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Personnel Matter, conference with Labor Negotiator Judy Hawkins, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management, regarding Deputy Sheriff's Association, Sheriff's Management Unit, Service Employees International Union, and Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association negotiations.
Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll go to closed session.
Item two.
Oh, excuse me.
Item 2 is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2.
Any public comment? Seeing none, we will now go to closed session. Good morning and welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting for January 23rd, 2018. Can we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? CAO Lutz, can you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, can you please read from closed session?
The report of closed session. Item 1, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Personnel Matter, conference with Labor Negotiator Judy Hawkins, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management, regarding Deputy Sheriff's Association, Sheriff's Management Unit, Service Employees International Union, and Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association negotiations. There was no reportable action taken. Item 2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2. There was no reportable action taken.
Thank you. Announcements, Madam Clerk.
Announcements. This is a time for board members and county staff to provide updates of upcoming county events that may be of interest to the public.
Are there any announcements? Staff, any announcements?
I do.
CAO Lutz.
Yes, it is with pleasure that I want to welcome Kathy Galino, if you wouldn't mind standing, Kathy. This is her first week starting the county as the Economic Development Director. Very excited to have her on board. I know she certainly went through a definite intense interview process, and appreciate her making it through that, and very excited to have her on board. She comes to us from most recently Sacramento County as a senior economic developer. I think her experience being local, she's a Valley Springs resident, with also her experience with economic development in Sacramento County will be an excellent asset to the county, so welcome.
Welcome. Any other announcements? If not, we'll move on. Madam Clerk.
Public comment.
Point of order. Yes.
I have a point of order regarding procedure, conduct, and Brown Act violations. The Brown Act ensures that meetings are open and public. If a member of a board, either individually or collectively, contacts a majority of the other members in an effort to influence or impact any actions or decisions on future meetings outside the purview of the public, it is a violation of the Brown Act. This can be individual meetings, it can be phone calls, it can be printed material, mail, or emails. It can be accomplished in a daisy chain manner or the hub and spoke manner, where one person tells another person and another person tells another person, or one person tells all the people about issues that may come before them.
So how are we committing the Brown Act violations right now in our procedures?
It's not right now. It's my concern about so much dysfunction. How can we have confidence in you folks being able to make decisions when we see, as the public, we can see our officials violating the Brown Act?
Okay, well, we're conducting this meeting right now, Bonnie. If you want to address that during public comment period, that's fine. But right now, a point in order would be for how we're proceeding in this meeting right now.
So far, so good.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk.
Public comment. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard.
Good morning, Dina Morris. I wanted to read an editorial to you that I saw. I thought it was very interesting and certainly applies here. And it's by thegazette.com, and the editorial is Biased Study Says Pot Helps Economy. And it's by the Gazette editorial board dated January 18th. The Washington Post reports on a new study that shows nationwide legalization of pot would create economic growth to the tune of $132 billion in federal tax money and 1 million new jobs in a decade. New Frontier Data compiled the findings, and the Post failed to disclose the company's self-professed partnerships with several major marijuana investment firms. Marijuana financiers controlled and commissioned the study, and the Post described their research arm as a data analytics firm focused on the cannabis industry, as if it merely observes. The study's self-serving conclusions appeal to a long-held myth that the destructive behavior is good for our wallets. Often taken to an extreme far beyond cigarettes and drugs, the tortured logic views mass human casualties as economic gain. The lack of major wars may be hurting economic growth, shouted a 2014 headline in the New York Times. The article blamed the persistence and expectation of peace for sluggish economies worldwide. Like it or not, spending on war is good for the economy, said a 2015 headline in Real Money. If true, we should invest reasons to fight. While at it, we could use more car crashes. They keep hospitals busy. They initiate vehicle sales and transaction fund governments. They put money in the hands of car dealers and sales personnel, which circulates to other markets. If all money exchanges cause economic gain, we should encourage more nicotine addiction. A pack of cigarettes circulates capital and generates taxes, as Big Tobacco points out. Sensing mass confusion regarding benefits of transaction, French economist Frederic Bastiat wrote the Glazier's parable in his 1850 essay. Qui quan vote, or blah, blah, blah. That which is seen and that which is not seen. Onlookers determine the damage will circulate capital and therefore help the common good. The Centers of Disease Control and Prevention reveals lost opportunity costs by highlighting $23,000 each pack-a-day smokers spend on cigarettes in a decade.
Thank you, Dina.
Thank you.
Sorry, could the people waiting in line please line up in the aisle instead of blocking the doorway? Thank you.
No
and there
more-
should be 5.
No more than 5, please.
Good morning. My name is Elaine, and I live in District 4, and I'm delighted that Dennis Mills is my supervisor. I kind of want to talk to you about something that comes from my heart. Some of you don't really know my story, but I lived on a sailboat in the Virgin Islands for 2 years, and it was a lot of fun. What happened when you get to live on the water is you really begin to understand the beautiful creation that God gave us. And it became really important to me. I love the sea, I love the water, and I kind of became a water activist. And I lived in Monterey County. Monterey County started becoming a place where there was a lot of crime. And there were a lot of drug issues and burglaries and break-ins and a lot of the things that made life very unbearable. So I talked to my cousin that lived in Texas, and he said, Elaine, California is a pit. It's a liberal pit. You got to move to Texas. So I said, heck, why not? I've lived all around the country before. Texas sounded good to me. So we bought a beautiful piece of property on a lake. We had our own dock. I could take my boat out. I could windsurf. I could swim in the lake. I could have fun. Bought this beautiful piece of property that was on the lake, and all of a sudden this really awful algae started growing on this lake, and I realized that I couldn't swim on it anymore. I lost the mast to my windsurfer in the move, and when I lost the mast to my windsurfer, I wasn't able to go out on my windsurfer, but I was able to go out and use it kind of as a paddle board. Well, I lost the paddle one day, and it was really kind of tragic because my board took off down the wind and everything. So I also found out that there were alligators on this particular lake. And I went, this is not a good thing. So I moved back to California. When I decided to move back to California, I decided that I would do research to find an area that was a nice, good, strong, conservative area that had low crime. Calaveras County looked like the best place. I could be on the lake. I love the water. I'm a water activist. I care about the water. So I moved to Calaveras County knowing that I would live in a conservative area. So now we have a problem in California. Last year I came and I asked for sanctuary state to be looked at. The board did nothing about that. I need you guys to do this. I need you to do a state of emergency about the environment as well. I want you to keep this in mind. Keep the beauty of Calaveras County in mind. Thank you.
Good morning. Trent Fiorino, District 1. I wasn't able to be here at the meetings, the recent meetings, because we were on vacation, but we did watch them online. I appreciate the county streaming the meetings because we were able to watch them in Tahoe. And I wanted to come up and congratulate Gary Toffanelli for becoming chair. Excited about that. You're my supervisor. And you probably know that we probably didn't get off to the best start a year ago. I know you referred to me at one time as the pastor that threatened you. I still debate whether it was a threat or not, or a promise, but the thing that you impressed me with is that you came up to me and you spoke to me about it. And we had a conversation about it. And what I've liked about you is you've been very open. And anytime we've had a disagreement, you've had a one-on-one with me. That impressed me. I had other opportunities with another supervisor at one time going to a town hall meeting. Never met him before. He smiled, shook my hand, I handed him a piece of paper that had an opinion that was opposite to his. He immediately turned his back to me and didn't speak to me. But you didn't do that. You spoke to me. And I appreciated that. The other thing I appreciate about you is you do your homework. we didn't agree on whether there should be regulations or not, but you did your homework on it. And when you came prepared, I realized that you were stepping out of a position that we elected you for and sticking your neck out. There's a verse from my favorite book that says, "Woe to the man whom everyone thinks well of." You took a chance, and not everybody thinks well of you now. And that's actually a good thing, because it means you're doing the right thing. You stuck your neck out, you compromised as much as you could, but then you stood your ground, and I just want to thank you for that. Really appreciate that about you. I think that you're going to make a good chairperson. I'm excited that you're leading these meetings, and I hope that this year we'll see a little more civility in the room. I think all of us need to hold our comments. I know it was before a meeting today, but there are individuals behind me that were calling some of the supervisors bimbos as they walked in the room. I've sat during meetings while people behind me were making comments, calling some of them morons and other comments like that. I know you probably can't hear them up here, but we hear them pretty well back there, and that really needs to stop, because I know all of you were elected to your position. We may not all agree with you, but we don't need to be calling you names. We need to have a better atmosphere of civility in here, and I would hope that if you hear that being done, that you'll put a stop to it.
Thank you. The chair recognizes former Supervisor Russ Thomas.
Good morning, gentlemen, ladies. I want to start by saying that although I'm currently sitting on CCWD's board, my comments this morning have in no way reflect my attitudes or opinions on that board. Please don't think that they do. This is for items that are not on the agenda, but I would suggest to you, kind of following up on the previous gentleman's suggestions, is that there is something that I would really encourage you to bring to this board, and that would be a code of conduct for the board. I don't think that such a code of conduct exists. It might be something as simple as the rotary four-way test, but if you look back on the recording of the last meeting that you had, the last Board of Supervisors meeting, that point in which the meeting that you were selecting board assignments, I came in late to that meeting, but I heard some comments by the 5th District Chair, this person sitting in the 5th District Chair, the same chair that I occupied for 48 months, and I heard him say some things that I never would have imagined would come out of the mouth of a sitting member of the Board of Supervisors, specifically comments that amounted to slander to a couple of members of this citizenry here. One person who sat on the IHSS board, he said, "I don't want to serve with her because she did such and such." That's a slanderous comment, and I would encourage the county council to take him in a room and explain to him that he is subject to being sued for that. If that person can prove that she has been damaged in any way, either emotionally or financially, he would be compelled by a court of law, a jury or a judge, to compensate her for that affront. I heard the same gentleman say at one point that his qualifications came from the fact that he was elected to the position. Now, I'm looking at people on this board, and I recognize that a lot of you have had years of experience on councils, grand jury, years of community service, and that's what I consider myself to be, as a servant of the community, and not a person who would sit there and pontificate. Now, Supervisor Clapp, I look back at the statistics on your so-called election. It is not lost on me that 66% of the people that voted in that election voted for somebody else other than you. The 33 or 34% that voted for you does not in any way give you a mandate to behave in the manner that you behaved last meeting. Please.
Thank you.
Oh, my name, it means nothing, my age it means less. The country I come from is called the U.S. I was born and brought up there, the laws to abide, and learned the land that I lived in had God on its side. The history books tell it, they tell it so well. The cavalry's charged and the Indians fell. The cavalry's charged and the Indians died. But the country was young and had God on its side. The Spanish-American War had its day. The Civil War, too, was soon laid away. And so on through American aggression and submission, we come to today. I've learned to hate the Russians all through my whole life. If another war comes, then it is them we must fight. To hate them and fear them, to run and to hide. What if the Russians now too have God on their side? Now that I'm leaving, I'm weary as hell. The confusion I'm feeling ain't no tongue can tell. But I can't think for you. You'll have to decide whether Judas Iscariot had God on his side. I think it's important that we remember that sometimes you might think you're right. You might even convince other people that you're right. But it don't mean you're right. It don't mean you're right.
Good morning, Board. Bill McManus. First of all, I'd like to start off by thanking Supervisor Clyde Clapp, Dennis Mills, and Gary Toffanelli for moving this county along in a positive way very quickly after several years of hideous delay and mayhem and chaos for the citizens of our county. I would like to particularly thank Chairman Toffanelli for his courage and leadership at that meeting. I know it was a tough time for everybody, but when we need people to stand up, we look to our leaders. You are a leader, and I thank you very much. I think the citizens of your district and throughout the county would echo those sentiments. Now that we're past that, we know that this is not the end, but the beginning of the end. And there are some things that I will be here to remind you from time to time. I think I sent some emails out to you of things that need to be taken care of to move us through to the end of this. The first thing is talking about putting ordinances on the ballot. The ban ordinance has a high content of Prop 64 regulations. I would ask that you maybe let that ordinance take effect and settle in to see if there's any updates, changes, or tweaks before you put it to the people, because once we approve it, it'll have to go back to the people for fine-tuning, so you might want to consider that. As far as putting a regulate ordinance on the ballot, we feel that that would violate federal law. Therefore, it would be an illegal initiative and would never make it to the ballot, so why waste your time? We would also ask that this board consider a state of emergency similar to the one Yuba County has, and I think Siskiyou, there's a couple other counties, concerning the problem of marijuana and how to clean it up. In conjunction with that, I would ask the board to work with the sheriff and investigate the possibility of joining up with the Central Valley High Intensity Drug Agency to get the assets needed to help clean up this mess, because we know that Calaveras County has limited capabilities to do that. Also, one other item that was left behind during all of this was the dispensary ordinance. That would be 1791. It was kicked down the road again, that can, for 120 days. And we would ask that the board consider that ordinance to be brought before for public comment and to reference the recommendations from the Planning Commission on 1791 and see if we can get that straightened out as we move on. And then I think your job will be done on this, and we can do general plan and some of the other fun stuff, budgeting and regional transit and all that. So county has a lot of business ahead of it. Let's clean this up and move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Vicki Reinke, Angels Camp. I just wanted to take a minute here, and I know 3 minutes isn't a lot of time, so I can't read all of this, but I wanted to remind all of you and the public of what happened in November of 2016 when we voted for Measure D. That was a regulate proposition initiative on the ballot, and this was the question that was on the ballot. Shall an initiative measure to regulate the cultivation of cannabis for commercial and non-commercial activities within authorized zones in the unincorporated area of Calaveras County be adopted? That was a question asked of us as voters. And then I'm just going to read a couple sentences here and then, because I don't have time to read it all. A yes vote on this measure would grant the County of Calaveras legal authority to regulate the cultivation of cannabis for all purposes within the unincorporated territory of Calaveras County by adding Chapter 1795 to the Calaveras County Code. New Chapter 1795 would allow specific types of cultivation of cannabis in certain zones, provided a cultivation applicant obtains the required license and either a zoning clearance certificate or administrative use permit issued by the county planning department, depending on the type of operation sought. So, and it goes on, and people can look this up. It's from the ballot booklet that we all use when we go to vote. Then it says Calaveras County Measure D, argument in favor of Measure D. Your yes vote means to support strong regulation of cannabis cultivation and commerce in Calaveras County and the removal of non-incorporated and unregistered growers. The measure provides fees to support county departments to regulate cannabis, such as law enforcement, code compliance, environmental health, and land use approval. The measure has regulations regarding noise and light pollution, water use and state water requirements, cultivation area and property line setbacks of 75 feet, storage and use of pesticides and herbicides, security plan including background checks on growers. Measure D establishes control and land use regulations, curbing unregulated marijuana grows in Calaveras County. Passing Measure D provide a vehicle for taxation on grow sites. Please vote yes on D and regulate the cannabis operations in Calaveras. So I just want to remind everybody, this is what voters were told and read. They overwhelmingly voted no to regulation in this county, and for some reason that doesn't equate to we want a ban, but that is what it equates to, and putting another one on the ballot I don't understand. So anyway, I just wanted to remind you of what that was. Thank you.
We only have time for 2 more speakers, I'm being told by the clerk. So 2 more.
I want to thank you guys for turning our county around and taking a stand on how marijuana is infringing on other people, your constituencies. And when Proposition 64 happened, they spent $3 million for people that were against it, and $33 million for people that were for it. And I personally, from my point of view, it was a huge lie and a huge mistake, and we're going to have to turn our county around and our entire country around on this issue. One of my sons says failure to confront is permission to proceed. The pot industry has proliferated because our county has allowed it. Several years ago, a past supervisor was voted out because he became a pro-pot. When he was first elected, he was taken on a helicopter ride to note all the thriving pot grows by the sheriff. If you, as the Board of Supervisors, are serious about a ban, you need to reach out to every resource available to you. It is no less than tragic that this money-making, drug-proliferating, drug-addicting activity has devastating watershed results to our county, but much further confines than our state lines. We are in a state of emergency, and I hope that you'll reach out to all the resources that are available to you and do what you can do to get those agencies and resources behind you to do what needs to be done. Thank you.
My name is Ron Huckabee. I'm from La Contenta. I want to thank the 3 members that voted on against the marijuana cannabis coalition that was trying to push you into an area that you didn't really want to go. There is a resource, it's called the Colorado Department of Public Health and Safety. That state initiated a marijuana cultivation and commercialization law. If you go on that website, there's a 147-page document that tells you everything about that initiative and how it's affected the state of Colorado. If you don't avail yourself of that resource before you vote to put anything that would cause marijuana to be cultivated in this county, then you should be ashamed of yourselves. I know Mr. Tofinelli has done his due diligence. I'm thankful to Mr. Mills and Mr. Clapp, and I hope that Mr. Garamundi and Mr. Oliveira will avail themselves of that resource and make the right decision before you put anything on the ballot that the people of Calaveras can vote for. I'm going to give you a couple of statistics and hope it will shock you into realizing that you need to do that. This is a chart that's on the California, figure 16 on page 50 of that report. From 9 to 17 years old, in the 4 years since the initiative, since the law was passed, the human marijuana exposure calls to Rocky Mountain Poison and Drug Center by age group. 100% increase between 9 and 17 years of age. This is the most shocking. Between 0 and 8 years of age, a 300% increase in toxic poisoning to 0 to 8 years of age. You hold the use future in your hands, and you need to ban completely any type of commercial marijuana grows in this county. There are laws in the state about medical marijuana, 3 plants mature, 3 plants immature. That's for medical marijuana. The state of California is violating federal law by its marijuana laws. Everybody says, well, it's the law, it's the law. It's not the federal law. You are in violation of that. Everybody screams about money, money, money. We need the money to support our police officers. Is the money worth the risk that you're willing to take?
Thank you. All right, we will continue public comments after the regular agenda. Madam Clerk.
Consent agenda. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion.
Okay, I want to remind everybody to please turn off their cell phones while they're in the chambers. That being said, is there any board member like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Any item? Yes.
Mr. Chair, number 5.
Number 5. Any staff member wish to pull any item? If not, any member of the public wish to pull an item from the consent agenda? Yes, Mr. Fry.
Yes, item 4, please.
Item 4. Anyone else? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, so move. The balance of the consent agenda be accepted.
Have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Is there any other comments? Any public comments on any of the agenda items? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Mr. Fry, you pulled item number 4.
So item number 4 is from the Health and Human Services Agency to authorize the board chair to execute an agreement with Five Claw Maintenance for janitorial services in the Human Services Building located at 509 East St. Charles Street, San Andreas, in an amount not to exceed $80,900 during the period of September 1, 2017 through September 30th, 2018.
Good morning, Board. My name is George Fry, and I just want to know whether there was a due diligence in terms of the current employees who do janitorial work here at the Government Center, why we're going outside of the Government Center, and I would like to know if this was advertised in the newspaper. I didn't see it, but it's possible that I missed it. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Judy Hawkins, Human Resources and Risk Director. I can answer the first part of the question. I did have a meet and confer with the union regarding how this impacts our current employees. We are currently recruiting for 4 positions for our custodial staff. We do not have the staffing to be able to take on the HHSA building, but this is something that I am in talks with the HHSA department to look at future options.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Kristen Brinks, Health and Human Services Agency. To answer Mr. Fry's question, yes, in 2016, a request for quote process was executed through normal county procedures, and so that is how the vendor was selected.
Is there any other comments or questions?
Today's January 23rd, 2018. What does that have to do with 2016? I want to know whether they recently put it out for bid. Thank you.
Kristen Brinks, Health and Human Services. As I just mentioned, it was put up for bid in 2016. County Code does allow us to execute extensions with vendors when the proper bidding process is executed, as it was.
If I could also add
Yes.
to that piece from a purchasing standpoint, typically the rule of thumb on RFPs, and while there is no firm guidance within government code, we typically go out about every 3 years for RFPs. I think as Ms. Hawkins alluded to, the fact that we were trying to look at staffing for the janitorial services in-house versus a contracted option, going out to RFP at this point was not as much of a, we didn't see it as the recommended option as much as run it out for the final year before we evaluate going out to RFP and what that might look like.
Yes, Bonnie.
Just a couple comments. If you're looking for 4 vacancies, does that mean when those 4 are filled, they will take over this service. And I was in janitorial in the 80s, and they did cost studies of what it costs to have a employee on a county employee as opposed to staffing it out. And it was an outstandingly difference that the homegrown one was much cheaper and you had more control. And I'm just wondering if those are considerations that you make when you're, sending out a contract with an outside agency.
Any other comments? Judy, do you have an answer? Do you want to discuss that or talk about it?
In my conversations with SEIU, we are definitely going to look at the cost of contracting compared to in-staff doing the work. We really would like to go toward having the custodial staff to be able to do the work in that building, which is the direction that we really want to go.
All right.
Just a further comment. I don't understand. Well, I have not seen any ads for janitorial people to be hired by the county. So I respect what Judy's saying, but I do not. I have not seen any ads, and I subscribe to the Enterprise and the Valley Springs News, which has the contract with the county. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other public comments? If not, I'm going to bring it back to the board. Do I have a motion on this item or any conversation on this item?
No conversation, I'd move the item.
Pardon?
Oh, I say if there's no conversation, I'll move the item.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion. So moved. Second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Item number 5, Supervisor Oliveira, you pulled this item.
Item number 5 is from the Administrative Office to make a finding of public benefit and reimburse Mr. Robert C. Toynbee in the amount of $175.89 to cover the cost of the copies of a report that were presented to the board at its meeting on November 14, 2017.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I pulled this for purpose of clarity. I know that it's in the board agenda packet, but for the purposes of the public, this reproduction cost is being reimbursed for which item, and why are we reimbursing it? Was he charged for this?
I'll answer that question for you. This stems from when in November the Public Works Department was working on updating our road projects. One of those projects stemmed from the CSA 4, and specifically the recommendations that Public Works made on maintaining one of those roadways and addressing what was asbestos mitigation on that roadway. As a counterpoint, a couple members who are appointed on that advisory committee came to the board to present their report on the roadway and what they would like to see. What we subsequently discovered that is a problem with a couple of our CSAs that should hopefully be addressed at our next board meeting is the meeting did not represent a quorum of that membership. So the issue we ran into is while those two advisory committee members did make a number of copies for the public and the board per our normal rules when coming to the board to provide a presentation, the cost of those were incurred by Mr. Toynbee to the tune of $175. Recognizing that there was not a quorum present to authorize that expense, instead what we were seeking is a public benefit finding to reimburse those two members for coming to the board, providing their report, and doing work for their CSA and their feeling is their capacity as board members of that CSA or advisory council members.
Did they elect to incur that cost on their own without any question or inquiry to the procedure?
My understanding is, and perhaps Supervisor Mills can provide further clarification, was that coming to the board is a request of a board member to actually present that report to the board.
Go ahead, Mr. Mills, if you will.
Thank you. Yeah, I had meetings with the two advisory members of that CSA prior to their presentation before the board to ensure that the information they were going to be able to give was accurate and timely. That required them to prepare copies of photographs as well as to provide mapping, and so that everybody could have a good visual of what was the state or the condition on specific parts of those roads. I think it was valuable. I had met with them the Monday before that meeting to review their information, and I felt that it was valuable enough to be able to be presented to the full board and to the public in making those determinations. And I think their presentation did help to kind of reset the direction and the priorities for their CSA, and has helped substantially in gaining some semblance of repair work down there on South Horseshoe, which was the other part of the problem from the storm damage. So it has led to other subsequent conversations, and I think it was invaluable. The separate conversation of the CSAs in general will hold back until the next meeting, and I know that we need to probably even be thinking about how we are compensating, or whether we have something in our budgets to compensate our advisory members for work that they do on our behalf. They are not ones to make the decisions. It is the board's decisions that make these things happen. But I think that having their eyes and ears on the ground, not just in CSA 4, but all of our CSAs, is a critical component to our success in making sound decisions. So that's why it's here.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comment on this issue?
I have a question, if that's all right, Mr. Chair. And this to CAO Lutz. Why are we pulling these funds out of the general fund and not out of the CSA funds? This is a CSA expense, correct?
It is, given the nature of the public benefit finding, that was why it was chosen as opposed to coming out of the actual CSA budget. And under the guise that where the auditor controller's concerns were because there was not a quorum that voted on expending that, it was therefore not allowable for the CSA budget, and instead what we were asking for is a general fund to reimburse it as a public benefit finding.
Where's the public benefit finding in our packet?
The public benefit finding is essentially that the board finds a public benefit to receiving that report, that it helped in the deliberative process, essentially in this instance, but that we acknowledge there was not a quorum that voted to bring that report forward to the board for consideration.
I certainly understand. I certainly want Mr. Tonby to be reimbursed. He was doing this under the direction of a supervisor from this board, who clearly believed it was for the public benefit. I am most concerned about precedent. I know we've spent a lot of time making sure we keep our, certainly Mr. Mills has spent a lot of time making sure we keep our expenses in the right columns. We have expense that's jumping into another column. And I wonder if we set a precedent. So if my CSA has decided they want to hire attorneys and they don't have the money, or where does this, I'm worried about precedent for all our other advisory committees across the board. And CSAs are advisory to this board. So perhaps you could help me feel comfortable that we're not setting a precedent where this is just the beginning of many.
Well, I think the first piece there is, I think we were all unaware of some of the challenges on the membership of the advisory committee, that being we have 5 appointed members, only 3 filled, or I should say 5 seats, only 3 that are actually filled, which created a problem for us in general where you have to have all three of those people together to constitute a quorum. What we're subsequent doing then is trying to rectify by having 3 positions. If we can't get those 2 additional people, then we'll make 3 membership.
I understand that. My question specifically is how do we, not the makeup of the CSA boards, but how are we going to keep this from not happening in other places?
The next piece would be from the governance of the CSA. Part of why this is a general fund and not a CSA use of funds is that there are very specific rules as to what those CSA funds can be used for, and those purposes being improvement of those roads, the infrastructure in that particular CSA. If a CSA requested that they would have an attorney, using your example, that would still have to come through the county, and at that point we would identify it as a expense that doesn't meet the criteria of administering those CSA funds, and we would reject it or bring it back to the board in this type of a fashion for consideration. I agree we don't want to set a precedent, which is part of why this has been since November and it took as long as it did to get here, because I think trying to look at this from every avenue, how do we prevent this type of a thing from occurring again? Since it certainly wasn't the intent to set a precedent that we would be reimbursing for costs if residents come to the board and are making a presentation or report. This was a little unique in the CSA membership felt they had a quorum of their membership there. They were asked to provide this report by a supervisor. We felt there was enough gray area here to justify bringing this to the board for consideration.
Why do we not make these copies in-house? Why do we not run them over in the clerk's office? And Mr. Mills had asked for this information in advance. They had time to go. So was there not enough time to come to the camp to email that to the county and print it?
That's a very good question, and no, there wasn't. We had assembled this on the Monday prior to the board meeting to be sure that it was available on Tuesday for the board meeting. And so I just put a time crunch in there to be sure we had enough copies for everyone. But yes, I'm certain in the future that could be done. I think in the broader discussion, and not to derail, is we need to have a broad discussion on our CSAs and what they can and cannot do. And that has to be a separate agenda item, but I'm looking forward to that conversation, that we're ensured that our CSAs are able to assist us and help us where they can, and provide some funding mechanism for them to be able to do that, and to not be always using volunteer time, volunteer gas, volunteer whatever, to do their work for us. So that's a separate discussion, I believe. I would defer to the auditor and to our staff as to how best to proceed with this and to not get us tangled up. And I agree with you. I think that precedent should be an important consideration. I appreciate that being brought into this discussion. I think it's a valuable piece that we don't repeat this. And if we find that we've done this now, let's be sure we don't repeat it. And we've got mechanisms in place to prevent it from happening in the future.
I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure that we all have an agreement amongst ourselves that, we're not going to jam things like this. And in the future, I don't want to hurt Mr. Tommy. I think he did it with the best of intentions. I question the public benefit, but I think we need to move forward, and let's all just be really conscious about setting precedent and use of public funds. Thank you.
I do have a couple questions myself, and I was going to save till after public comment, but since we've opened this up, my question is, was $175.89 worth of receipts turned in?
Yes.
We do have those receipts.
We do have the receipts.
And you said that there's 3 seats filled on the CSA board, so they do have a quorum.
There's 3 seats that are filled. However, one of the members is really not participating much, and when the CSA members actually met, it was just the 2 of them, not that 3rd person.
So have they presented this bill to that board? Have they attempted to get a quorum either by phone or by whatever and try and present this and have this board buy off on taking it out of the CSA funds?
Well, actually, the money cannot be expended from the CSA as we currently have the CSA set up. that's another one of the glitches that we have to bring back to the board for a discussion as to how do we create an expense account or some type of expenditure account within the CSAs so that they have that some kind of money available for them to use to, for instance, because they have to come before LAFCO for the studies that are done there. There's other things that they do for us, and we want to be sure that that separate discussion though is undertaken. I don't think it's ever been discussed before by a board as to what our CSAs can and cannot do.
Okay, I'll open it up to public comment at this time.
I have one more comment.
Supervisor
Mr. Chairman.
Oliveira.
Seeing that this decision and ruling, if you will, was made by the auditor, maybe we can get her to come over and address some of the issues of what we can and cannot do with this particular incident. I hate to be demanding, but apparently she tells us what we can spend and what we can't spend, so let's get her opinion.
I certainly can reach out to her
I
if she's not
appreciate
already
it.
listening. She might already be on her way running up here. I know typically she is
I know
listening.
she's busy, but we don't want to set precedents here, as the other members of the board stated.
While we do that, I was going to also add, council reminded me, and this is an important point, that based on how the CSAs are structured, the first step is they need to be working with the Public Works Department. And I think as we proceed and going back to that precedent setting and what's allowable, is making sure that Public Works is communicating with the CSAs, knowing if they're looking at this type of a study, because this could have, to Supervisor Toffanelli's point, we could have had, more advanced notice, worked with the CSA board to come back for an approval for that expense, if it's allowable, or we could have, at a minimum, had the advanced copies made through Public Works Department and saved the cost to that CSA.
Great.
Any other board comments?
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Public comments.
Marty Crane. Okay, so we've all been watching, well, I've been watching this for many, many years. We go through things where we do things and we go, that wasn't right. And then we kind of smooth it over because we don't want to insult or call that fellow board member under scrutiny or anything. So we kind of brush things aside and we get past it. And then it happens again. And all this seems to come back because when we elect people to serve as supervisors on our board of supervisors, it is no secret, although we seem to forget it all the time, that as individual supervisors in your individual districts, you have no authority. What you have is influence with and through this board. So you don't have the authority to say, sure, we'll reimburse that. You don't have the authority to say, go ahead and make those copies and we'll take care of it later. That's not your right to say that. You have to work with and through this board. We have policies in place that protect everything just from this sort of thing so that we don't set precedents over and over and over again and say, well, we did it before, we've done it before. That is just, it's critical that we watch these processes and that as supervisors, you know what they are. And if you don't, you say, just a minute, I'll check, I'll get back to you. Apparently that was not done. Permission was given to make these copies. I don't know how they could think they had a quorum if they only had 2 people, so that argument doesn't work for me. And so I'm thinking that perhaps in the interest of holding our representatives accountable, it's $100 and something?
$175.
$175. Okay. Perhaps I could suggest that Supervisor Mills, we all learn from this and that you just write a check. Thank you.
Dina Morris, I'm here to talk about the CSA 4 and all of the hard work that the 2 people that are representing our CSA do and volunteer on their own time. Hundreds of hours driving 18 miles of roads, taking pictures with their own phones and taking pictures of the damage with the latitude and the longitude and sending this information to our Public Works. That is saving Public Works a lot of money rather than having them come out and surveying these 18 miles of roads. That is a lot of roads to be covered. These two people are very dedicated to helping the community, and they volunteer a substantial amount of time to being the representatives of our CSA 4. And I understand the position of not wanting to set precedents. I just don't think that this warrants setting a precedence. It's $175. It's not like they're turning in hundreds of hours of their time for what they have volunteered to do as part of a CSA 4. And as far as I can tell, the CSA 4, the community is not really getting a benefit from being a CSA 4. Not at all. Our roads are maintained mostly by us, our money, and yet they're public roads. And today, our road is still tore up with potholes everywhere. I don't know what's going on, but I really think that the county needs to pay more attention what is going on with our CSA 4s to see what they can do to help us and maybe convert us to something different that works better. Thank you.
Bill McManus. I'm concerned about precedent too. And on this particular item, I know that there's a certain way that you do things to get things done properly. $175 that someone put out at the last moment to have documents ready. You know, I get all that. But let's go back a little bit further last year at a meeting where I don't know if it was confusion or premeditated, when this board tried to present items that had new information attached to it. And actually the crowd got pretty upset about it because it was an agenda item that was going to be discussed and we didn't have the information and it wasn't posted on a timely basis. That was an evening meeting, and as you'll remember, we adjourned for about an hour and a half while county staff started making copies of this. When we came back in the room, there were stacks of paper that high, still warm from the printer. And that was an attempt to maybe inoculate those documents so that satisfied the lack of compliance of getting those documents out to the public in a timely manner. I don't know. But a lot of times, if things aren't done properly, you can see how it can snowball from a few pictures for a CSA or a TSA to thousands of pages trying to satisfy the complaints of the citizenry that they were not properly informed or had the documents in front of them in a timely manner so that they could discuss it at that meeting. So yes, precedent is a concern for all of us. I hope the legacy of the last board on some issues doesn't come forward and become precedent in this board. I'm reassured that it won't. But I just want to remind you that when it does happen, people start losing confidence in their government. They think that they're being fooled. So hopefully we don't go there again. Thank you.
George Fry. I believe it's the responsibility of the members of the Board of Supervisors to see that those seats are filled. I know that having served on the Commission on Aging and the In-Home Supportive Services Committee and the Area 12 Agency on Aging, that when I became a member of those organizations or those committees or boards or commissions, I was given a handbook. It tells exactly what you're supposed to do in terms of your responsibilities. I'm kind of disappointed that that you folks haven't looked into that. We have a lot of empty seats on the Commission on Aging. And you, as members in your districts, need to go out and find people that will serve and serve properly. If this CSA 4, the 2 members that are active, they need to go out and find 3 others to be on there so that they do have 5 members and they can have a quorum of 3 of the 5. I don't appreciate the fact that this money's coming out of the general fund. It seems like they just did their own due diligence, and they're going to have to figure out how to solve that problem without taking our taxpayer money out of the general fund. I can't wait until we get the preliminary budget this year. It's going to be amazing. $175 is a substantial amount of money, but the budgeting for 2018, 2019, I don't know where you folks are going to get the money. I follow the budget. I don't get paid for it, nor would I want to. I've been a person that's volunteered in the community for over 40 years in this county. Thank you.
That all public comment?
Mike Falvey, District 2. I'm not 100% familiar with this issue, this item, but generally from the public point of view, and I think that's what I'm representing right now, I don't have any dog in this fight, as the old saying goes, but this is the second time this morning that the actions of a particular supervisor have been brought into question, whether they were scrupulous or not. I don't like the fact that any one supervisor can say, yeah, go ahead, make the copies, bill us, we'll cover you. What's next? I mean, I'm just going by what I hear, okay? So, you know, the image of our board is teetering right now. It's at to me, this is a trivial item, this $178, but it's indicative of what's happening. The public trust of this board is being called into view. Now we have a supervisor saying, go ahead and do it. I'll cover you. That's, wow, that's funny. I'm going to have a big barbecue in a couple weeks. Jack, will you okay me buying some beer for the boys? Will the county cover it? It's going to be some kind of county happening. I mean, is that what I could do? Just ask my supervisor to okay it? I know that's ridiculous, but to me, that's what just happened. And it doesn't look good. It's your image is at stake, gentlemen. This is the second time in today's meeting of supervisors' actions have been brought into question. So, you know, you might kind of nip this stuff in the bud before something big happens. Thank you.
I'm just curious why Public Works didn't do this. And the other thing I have to say is this just seems as though it seems to be an attack on Supervisor Mills. It seems a little personal, and I really object to that.
This is not about beer or precedents. It's about the public having a right to know, the public having a hard copy so they can comment in an informed way. If you go to the doctor, if you don't tell him what's wrong with you, he can't diagnose you. And that is what happened here. They try to, ahead of time, give the information in good faith to the public so that the public had a right to know what was going on. And I commend that attitude. Thank you.
Sorry, it's easier than going, Minister. This has been a very interesting discussion. I get the impression that guys needing something to do their job, not having a board full of people so that there's nobody on the board is insufficiently staffed to actually give authority. They went to Mr. Mills. It would appear that he's been involved in the discussion. And I've got to tell you, gentlemen, if these two guys on their own spent their own money getting the documents so that they could go to the meeting on the day that was allocated, and we were a company, we'd be disgusted with ourselves. We have now spent God knows how much time worrying about $175 and a few cents. We ought, as a board, in my opinion, to pay these guys the money and then sit down and work out how we deal with the problem afterwards. We can't have, because if you don't have volunteers saying, I'll just pay for it now, and they do take the trouble, then we're going to grind to a halt. If you were a business, you wouldn't grind to a halt. I said pay them the money and then deal with the activities that need to be dealt with to put the board right and to make sure that you have some control over what's going on for the future.
Any other public comment? If not, I'll close public comment. I just closed public comment. Sorry.
That's okay. You didn't want to hear it anyway.
CAO Lutz.
Point of order.
Yes.
This gentleman was outside. He was listening, and he came in to go to the podium and have something.
And I said public comments. I asked. I paused for a significant amount of time.
Wasn't fast enough, Gary. It's okay.
And so.
Just let him speak.
Mr. Wilson, come on in and speak, please. You will be the last. I already ruled. Mr. Wilson will be the last speaker. That's it.
Mr. Wilson, District 1. Thank you, Gary. Thank you very much. $178. Ain't crap. Probably take it out of my pocket and give it to you if that's what it is. But for a supervisor to authorize somebody to make copies and then ask the county, all of the taxpayers of the county, to reimburse that person for making copies for a specific thing seems to be a little bit outrageous. Unfortunately, that doesn't surprise me in this group. You all seem to want to do stuff like that, or at least the three of you do. But that's just my opinion. Thank you. Thank you for the time, sir.
You're welcome. Public comments is closed. CAO Lutz, you have something to say?
Yes. I apologize we were not able to track down Rebecca. I know the clerk and myself were working on doing that. Yes, Kathy, the assistant auditor, came in, and then I also have Jeff Krovitz, Public Works Director. Between the two of them, I think they can address valid expenditures under the CSA, what is allowable at this point.
There was some discussion, and Ms. Kellen had asked that this item come to the board because we do need to find a public benefit in order to issue a check. And that's just the reality of it. Any question?
Jeff, do you have anything to add to it or anything? Okay.
I can answer questions.
Pardon me? You want to come to the podium?
Jeff Krovitz, Public Works. I'm more than willing to answer questions. This item, I don't know if you all recall, but this item was actually a board item that was agendized to discuss this board, which is the CSA, approving proposed improvements out in the Diamond 20 subdivision. And the two members that are members of the advisory board had a meeting that didn't have a quorum, expended money to make copies and bring something to the board under that item, and then asked for reimbursement. We at Public Works didn't feel that we could reimburse them out of the CSA under the rules that we are given to operate under. In terms of decision making have to be done by a majority of the advisory committee, and that's sort of how this has evolved. I'm sorry that we're here. I'll take any questions.
Well, not so much questions, but in terms of the processes, and that's what we're dealing with here is a process matter. I know that will be corrected in a future board agenda. So, and it isn't the only CSA that has these kind of issues of not having a sufficient quorum to operate. CSA 2, I think, is now in that same boat. So these are things that we can deal with in the future, but it's just an unfortunate conjunction of a lot of activity that occurred at a very important time for that CSA and for Public Works as to providing getting direction and getting things done. So,
Supervisor Clapp, your light's on.
Yeah, I have a comment, but not so much to staff. But I have a CSA 1 in my district that I attend that meeting once a month, and there's 5 people who are hard working. They dedicate their time, and some put their money in, and I think when they represent all of that district, I think the district should really reimburse them for it. I know when they came here, they brought the information to this board. We read that information and made that decision on the information that was presented by that CSA 4. And I spent 3 hours at Olive Orchard Sunday night trying to form a CSA out there because they have 50 homes out there on new roads that they want to maintain. And a lot of these people put in their own time, their own efforts and stuff. And it is like Mr. Fry said, these people are dedicating their time. And I just, I hate to stick to people with a bill that they produce for their community. And I don't know I wish that we had some way, because that is a problem with my CSAs, of funding them, because we can't even fix a pot road. We had to phone Jeff up, and when we phone Jeff up, I think we get billed $20 for the phone call. And I would be inclined to support this.
Supervisor Olivera, your light's on.
Yeah, I do have a question for Mr. Krovis. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is there some indication that this particular issue is the result of the storm damage of 2017?
There was some damage on Sulky Court resulting from those storms.
Okay, is that related to the issue at hand right now?
Only in that it was the driver that brought an item in front of this board to make a capital expenditure utilizing the CSA funds.
Okay. That answers my question, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I am very concerned about the fact that this does set precedents. I am aware of my fellow supervisors' comments, and I do see a need that we adhere to policy. But having said that, I would personally commit to a personal contribution to these two folks to reimburse them. But that's my personal statement. I have to act for the benefit of the county and say that I believe that this would not be a general fund extension. Thank you.
Supervisor Clapp, your light's back on. Are you anything to say?
Yeah, I'll match what Mike puts in.
I have some problems with this issue too. When I saw it on the agenda and read it, I had some of the same concerns that Supervisor Garamendi brought up with setting the precedents and the fact that it was coming out of the general fund and the direction was given. I want to caution the supervisors that when we proceed with something like this, that you need to bring it to the board as a whole. And I will say this, I'm not in agreement of coming out of general fund and having the taxpayers pay for it. However, I will jump in and match whatever Supervisor Oliveira and Supervisor Clapp to pay the $175 out of our pockets. If Dennis, Supervisor Mills would like to jump in on that also.
Well, let's make the motion and the decision on this, and then I'll explain what's already been.
Okay, well then I'm looking for a motion.
You want to make your motion?
I will, Mr. Chair. I will move that we not participate in the refund of the $179 at this time as a county policy.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay,
And here's what I can explain. I've already paid them.
you've already paid them.
Okay, so we owe you money?
I got to shake a hand on that one.
Dennis.
I already paid it.
Mr. Chair, what did we just spend 40 minutes doing?
Yeah, why did we not say that before we went into
Thank
this
you, gentlemen.
conversation?
Jesus.
All right, Madam Clerk, we will have a 10-minute break.
How much you want?
Back in session. Madam Clerk, item number 10.
Item 10 is from the Administrative Office to approve a draw on contingencies in the amount of $100,000 to be placed in Object Code 5612 under non-departmental to be used for cannabis refunds. This action and associated budget transfer requires a 4/5 vote of the board.
Mr. Chair, my assistant will speak to this item. However, I would like to note the clerk, board members, and we have copies for the public. We're making a change to this item, and that includes changing the recommendation. I don't know if the clerk wants to read the new recommendation for the record.
Yes, please.
The new recommendation is to approve an increase to excise tax, Object Code 4061, in an amount of $4,191,050 and approve an increase to refunds, Object Code 5612, in the amount of $100,000 under non-departmental to be used for cannabis refunds. This action and associated budget transfer require a 4/5 vote of the board.
Good morning, Brian Moss, Administrative Office, and thank you for that introduction on that item. Both CAO Lutz and our board clerk. Yes, this is a change. As described, we had originally proposed to do some refunds for cannabis tax, and I'll go through this in a minute, through contingencies. We have since changed that to actually to be reimbursed by cannabis funds under Measure C. So with that said, I'm just going to read a little bit of the background. I don't normally do that for the board, but since this is a new item and it's also up here for public review, I'm just going to go ahead and read that to you. So on December 9th, 2017, the Board of Supervisors adopted Resolution 2017-1219247, authorizing the Auditor Controller to release funds pursuant to 3.56130C6. Now that's county code. That's also the Measure C language that was approved by the electorate. That's under a non-departmental budget. It was to be used for cannabis refunds. The action and associated budget transfer requires a 4/5 vote of the board, as previously stated. And then back to this, on the 3.56130C6, orders of an administrative hearing officer, or 3.56150, determination by the tax collector that overpayment has been made. Again, this is action that the board has already taken. And this is a result of 2 redeterminations by hearing officers and 1 actual clerical error that was made, and that refund has actually already been made. So the bottom line is, in order for the auditor controller to release the funds for these items, we need to actually increase Object Code 5612 refunds, which is an expense account, to $100,000. Now, do we think we're going to hit that number? Probably not. But just to be safe, we're doing that. Our current costs that we've actually, or current refunds actually total $46,664 as we stand today. That's last year's tax. Those are last year's taxes, not this year's taxes, last year's taxes. And that's why it's coming before the board right now for action. In addition to that, as previously stated, we're also talking about increasing Object Code 4061, which of course is a revenue line item, by $4,191,050 to reflect actual revenue. That was brought about by the fact that as a result of increased revenues due to the collection of the second round of Measure C funds that were not included in the current non-departmental budget. So the bottom line is, obviously there is funding available. This is not coming out of contingency should the board make this motion, but is coming out of the Measure C funds.
If I could add a couple points. One, for clarification, is Mr. Moss alluded to, the original, and for clarification for where this changed, originally we had proposed reducing our contingency amount. So what we've done is instead change the budget line. Instead of reducing from the contingency budget, we've increased a revenue, recognizing that we've had more revenue. I think that's important just so the public's aware. That was where the change occurred. Otherwise, the item is the same. We're putting the money on this line to be able to pay for the refunds. The second piece that I would note that's important is we're still only increasing the expenses by $100,000. All of the remainder of that is now being placed on the budget contingency line, which means that will be board authority on anything that reduces those contingencies would have to come back to this board. So this basically recognizes that revenue, places it in the contingency budget for board's consideration for the remainder of the fiscal year.
Yes, Supervisor Garamendi.
Just so I understand, Tim, and I'm not very good at memorizing all these codes, but the contingency code is not 4061, is it?
That's the object line.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're not putting that whole 4.1 million into contingencies, or we are?
We are putting that into the contingency budget. That's correct.
Okay, and that's Measure C money that was collected at the end of 2017, early 2018, correct? We're just recognizing it.
Correct.
Why are we putting it in? Why are we putting in contingencies and not general fund dollars someplace else?
Well, contingency is a general fund budget unit. The difference is if we don't have an expense at this point to recognize to use those. So essentially, when we put it in contingencies, we mark it as it is general fund. It's in the general fund, but it does not have an expense associated with using it at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it?
That's it.
Supervisor Oliveira, your light is on.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Moss.
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
One simple question. How do we get $46,000 in refunds? Can you explain that?
Yes, I certainly can. Two of the refunds were from the hearing officers, the hearing officer program that the Board of Supervisors has approved, where we have hearing officers come in and hear appeals for redetermination of cannabis taxes. Now, understand that when somebody appeals a cannabis tax, it first comes to the CAO's office. In this case, 2 of those that have been, redetermination has been done by the hearing office, we had actually in the CAO's office denied. But additional evidence is sometimes presented at those hearings. And in this case, actually you had one hearing, there was $8,800 that was redetermined to go back to the cannabis grower, and the other one was $11,244. The other issue that was taken care of as far as the clerical error was done before the beginning of this new calendar year, and that was done by the board as well. That was the amount of money that was refunded because a gentleman had actually paid on an item that he wasn't supposed to pay. And so that was actually refunded. Supervisor Garamendi was intimately involved in that item as well. So again, 2 items were a redetermination by the hearing officers, and 1 was a clerical error.
Of course, I wasn't able to attend that hearing. Why did we refund $11,000? Did we mismeasure? A permit was erroneous?
You know, I would have to actually look at those items, but generally the common thread that we see is it's not so much a matter of did we measure something, because Title III actually addresses the registration. People are billed on the registration and or the permit, but not on the grow. Okay? So in some cases, maybe somebody was actually registered, or they had submitted something to planning saying that they had reduced their registration from, let's say, 22,000 square feet to 11,244 feet, as example. Well, that's just an example. But yes, those are the kinds of things that are brought forward. I don't actually attend those hearings. That is done by our hearing officer, and it's done by our assistant in our administrative office.
$11,000 is a lot of mistake.
Well, that's not a mistake necessarily. That's just a redetermination by the hearing officer. Again, I'm not familiar with those 2 specific cases as to what was done. I can tell you about the 26,620, which was the clerical error. That one's easy to talk about because the gentleman had made the efforts with the county, said he had no longer had the grow, et cetera, and yet he paid it anyway. Why he paid it, I can't really answer that, and probably Supervisor Garamendi can't answer that one either, but the bottom line is it wasn't due to the county. The other ones, again, were redetermination, and again, generally due to additional evidence brought before the hearing officers. It was not brought before our office.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moss. Thank you, Chair.
Supervisor Mills, your light's on.
Thank you. So as we draw down this account over time, will you be able to make available to us each one of those redeterminations?
Certainly can do that.
And the reasoning process, so that we can kind of understand why it fell into this category.
Absolutely. And that information is available certainly within our office, again, from the redeterminations from the hearing officers. We're happy to do that. I'll just for clarification, these 2 of these 3 items, the 2 of the redeterminations by the health officers, by the hearing officers, going in my past there a little bit, they are, again, done by the hearing officers, and we just have to abide by their decisions.
Any other questions? If not, I'll open to public comments.
Gentlemen, ladies, Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. I'm not clear as to what the effect to the taxpayer is on the, I assume this relates to the ban that was passed before. What is the liability to the taxpayers of money that has been collected by the county? It's an easy question. Hope I get an answer. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Good morning, George Fry. I wish I'd looked this up before I came to the meeting today. So, I just want to understand what the $100,000 is for. I understand the $4,191,050, but We're on the road, we as a county, to probably give back to the growers over $10 million, which won't be there for this year's budget like it was last year, because in order to balance the budget, $10 million was taken out of the cannabis fund. So anyway, I would just like have a more clearer picture, please.
I kind of agree with George. I don't really understand what the reimbursement is for. And if you guys don't decide today about that or not, but in the future, it seems like your staff should be giving you the details of what these things are for.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comments. Mr. Moss.
Yes, for the first question, liability of the taxpayer, actually I don't see that necessarily as a liability. These are Measure C funds that are specific for cannabis. Specifically, again, for the very reason we're not pulling this out of contingencies. So this, in this case, it's a little bit of money in, money out, but it's not actually hitting the general fund, obviously. It's not hitting contingencies. It is hitting that pot of money that has been collected from Measure C's under Title III. The $100,000 issue is a $100,000 buffer. What I want to clarify for the board is that, you know, next year, or actually the second round of cannabis taxes, I think we had 1 or 2 appeals. In the first round, which we're really talking about today, the 3 that, the 2 that went to the hearing officers, let me gather my thoughts here. They are the last year's issue. We've only had 1 appeal this year, which means really, are we going to hit this $100,000? I very, very much doubt it. Again, it's a buffer, and it's simply put into the account so that the auditor controller can go ahead and cut a check when a hearing officer makes a decision that is above and beyond the CAO's office.
Let me try and answer Mr. Fry's question, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But this is much like your property taxes. You get a bill for your property taxes, and the idea is when you get the bill, if you disagree with it, it's better to pay it up front and then put in an appeal and you go before the tax appeal board to state your case on why you felt you were overcharged. And so instead of not paying it up front and experiencing fees associated with not paying it on timely manner, you pay it up front again, and then you have the right to appeal. So this is much like your property taxes. If you feel you're overassessed on your property, you pay your taxes, and then you file an appeal. This is the same process. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, and thank you for that clarification. As a matter of fact, we have spoken to when people come in and they want to appeal, one of the questions we do have is, did you already pay your tax or not? Because as a fair warning, if you don't pay your tax and the hearing officer or the CAO's office or the hearing officer does not vote in your favor, then now you've accrued penalties in addition to. So again, this is an entirely new system. This is new to everybody. You know, we've been working through it, but Supervisor Tofanelli is absolutely correct. It's just very, very similar to your property tax, and really that's the best way to view it.
One time, George, that's it. Okay, go ahead, one time.
Well, I'm still on this issue here. The reason why when I saw the $100,000 And I think that the HR director probably could answer this question, but for every time the county's insurance they have to pay a $100,000 deductible, and that's the reason why I was interested in whether this $100,000 is, did somebody already file suit, or what's going on?
Okay. Thank you, George. Very interesting point. No, this has nothing to do with that at all. It was a number that, quite frankly, I had sat down and put in thinking that was a safe buffer. Again, we're at 46,664 at this point. I don't think we're going to touch it, but it's a placeholder in a budget in a line item so that if this does occur in the future for the remainder of the fiscal year, we actually have something to draw from. Right now, we just didn't have anything to draw from.
Okay. I'll bring it back to the board. Board, any discussion? Supervisor Oliveira? Do I have a motion?
I so move that we accept item number, I believe it's 10?
10.
Item number 10 is recommended by staff.
Yep. I have a motion and a second. Any other comments, discussion? Not, call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, item number 11.
Item 11 is from Information Technology to approve the attached quote for Microsoft Enterprise Agreement between the County of Calaveras and CDWG in the amount of $328,556.19 for a 3-year period from January 1, 2018 through December 31st, 2020, and authorize payment for the first year of the quote for a total of $109,518.73.
Mr. Moore.
Good morning.
Morning.
Stan Moore from Information Technology. You heard what the recommendation is, and the Office of Administration has asked me to add onto that in addition to asking for authorization in the payment, we're asking the board to authorize the CAO office to issue a purchase order for that same amount of $109,518.73. The county has, for a number of years, participated in something that Microsoft offers to their clients as an enterprise agreement. This is a service agreement. So this gives us rights with our licenses that we would not otherwise have. These are licenses for Microsoft software that we have on our workstations and laptops at our desks, as well as for the servers. So a lot of the software that you're very familiar with using all the time, whether it's Windows on your PC or Office, there are licensing requirements with that. We have to make sure that we're current with all of our licensing agreements. This does not purchase additional licenses. This is a service agreement on those licenses that is a 3-year agreement. We determine how many licenses we have at the start of that 3-year agreement, and to do that we go through a process with Microsoft where they come in with a partner of theirs and they audit the number of licenses that we have in place. They come back and they say, here's the number of licenses we have, and then we work with one of their authorized resellers to purchase this agreement for a 3-year period. In order to get the best deal for the county, we work with their authorized resellers. The authorized resellers, one of whom is CDWG, they participate in a contract that is negotiated with Riverside County that enables state and local governments to piggyback on top of that contract. So that's where our competitive pricing comes into play. In this case, we get government level pricing, which is already a reduction for what the private sector would pay. And then on top of that government level discount that we get an additional 7.5% of a discount as a result of being able to piggyback on this Riverside agreement. So we've got the number of licenses listed out here in the document and some of the benefits. So there's some of the benefits in addition to what we have with keeping the licenses current. There's things like we get education capabilities that can be used by IT or other departments. All employees in the county have the ability to buy a license to use Microsoft Office on their home computer for like $10. And there are a number of other benefits that go along with this, with the managing of the licenses. When we have an enterprise agreement and we manage licenses, we do it at an aggregate level. We get to move licenses back and forth. Once a year, we count how many licenses we're using. We go through a true-up process. But it is a different process than without the agreement. Without the agreement, you're keeping track of each device and the license on it, and you're not transferring licenses between devices. So it's a much more effective way for us to manage our inventory of licenses. It gives us capabilities that we do not have without the enterprise agreement. And the county has participated in this at least for the last 8 years, perhaps before that. I started 3 years ago. We brought in we renewed an agreement at that time. The prior agreement had been 5 years. So this is something the county, other counties typically participate in this type of an agreement. This is a renewal. The 3-year period is $328,000. The initial year will be $109,000, the amount that's listed here. We did put, we had estimated that the cost would be $120,000 at budget time last year. So the funds are in the budget. We're asking to move forward with the renewal at this time.
Any board questions? Supervisor Mills.
Good morning, Stan.
Good morning, Supervisor.
Question would be, anytime you go into a renewal process, it's also an opportunity to look at other resellers,
Yes.
Did we do that here?
We did. We looked at the authorized resellers through Microsoft and through the Riverside agreement. We reached out to 2 of them. Even though they all participate in the same agreement, they should all be giving us exactly the same pricing. We reached out to 2 vendors to ask us to provide their best pricing. One of them responded. The other one had provided promises that they were going to respond and never did. So we did reach out to 2.
I wouldn't be asking the question if it was in here,
Okay.
kind of thing. That's the reason for asking. So you did get a quote from the other reseller?
They never did provide us a quote. We had asked for it several times, and they hadn't been able to.
Okay. So you did due diligence. There was no reason to put an RFP out at any time then to...
Well, we, through the Riverside agreement...
There is an RFP.
Then they have already gone through an RFP, and they did the competitive bid process, and then they enable us to piggyback on top of that. So that's where that initial RFP process took place with Riverside and Microsoft.
Are there other counties also piggybacking with, excuse me, with Riverside at this time?
Yes.
That you know of?
Yes. I can't tell you which ones right offhand, but Riverside County is at the forefront on many technology contracts with different vendors, and it's very common for counties to piggyback on top of the Riverside agreement. This also goes through something called NASPO, and NASPO is a national purchasing organization that coordinates these type of competitive agreements. So we piggyback on the Riverside agreement. Riverside agreement and CDW are also set up through this NASPO agreement that gives us more confidence that it has been competitively bid.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other board questions? If not, I'll open public comment.
Bill Wilson, District 1. Having been a Microsoft partner for over 15 years prior to retiring, the enterprise agreement is one of the strongest agreements and one of the best programs that Microsoft Office that offers to the public and to businesses, counties, governments. I know the Gap, I sold them an an enterprise agreement. Hyatt Hotels is a member. United Commercial Bank, East West Bank, all previous customers of mine, I sold enterprise agreements to them through the Microsoft Partnership Program. It is a very good deal. I don't know how many licenses you're getting for $109,000, but hopefully it's somewhere around less than $100 a license. Those licenses are transferable to new equipment when you upgrade to a new system. So you're not buying a preloaded unit with software that down the road is out of date and you have to pay to upgrade that software. With an enterprise agreement, every time Microsoft comes out with a new product, you can upgrade your stuff. It also provides for patches, security patches, just kind of like a virus program would. And I'm sure we have an enterprise virus program along with all of this other stuff. Anyway, it looks like a very good deal. Again, the only question is how much you're paying per license. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Al Segala, speaking as a realtor. Some time back, I brought to your attention that our system, that mapping system that we have, a GIS, was not functioning properly, in that when you go to the website to get the topographical maps with the parcels on it, it's not there. You just get the parcels, but no topographical information. I've contacted several times the GIS department, and they've indicated that this is supposed to be completed by a vendor that you have, and that that it has not been done yet, and not knowing when it will be. This system is important to not just realtors, but also to assessors and appraisers, because you can tell a lot about a property by looking at its contour lines, how steep it is, or how flat it is. And so I appreciate it if somebody would look into this and ask those people to complete the system. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Bill McManus. Going back some time ago in the late 70s and through the 80s, into the 90s as a matter of fact, I founded 3 computer companies down in the valley and throughout California. We were an enterprise provider with IBM. When I was doing this, Bill Gates was still working on his bicycle in his garage, so I don't know what Apple and Microsoft and all of the other ones have come up with. But what I was able to offer to my customers was improved capabilities and things like that. It wasn't just having the correct fix for the operating system so that it didn't go blank and all the other problems that you can have with computers. There was real value to the enterprise system that I offered my customers through IBM. I'm wondering if we're going to get the same thing, and after hearing the most current comments about the mapping GIS system, back in June or July, we had asked for a system to keep track of eradicated sites for marijuana, and that was going to be incorporated into the GIS system. I remember Administrator Lutz moved on it right away, made a lot of progress, and then all of a sudden it stopped. So there are still citizens that are looking to get that information, not for appraisals or anything else that you might find in the real estate agency, but to find out if there's properties in their areas with the topographical contour overlays that might represent a danger to their community if there's any kind of contamination uphill, upstream, or upwind. We have not been able to get access to that system yet. Will this help move that process along? Us not getting that access, is that because of reduced or non-existent capabilities to get it right and get it out to the public? So I'm all for enterprise agreements. I think they have many good things to them. I hope an added benefit will be an increased capability that's real-life capability for the citizens of the county who want to access that information. Thank you.
Dan, hold on, I think, George, you have a public comment? Why don't we finish public comments and you can answer?
The only question I have is a fiscal question. Who's paying for this? Is Microsoft paying for it? Is it coming out of the general fund? Who's paying for it?
Any other public comments?
Good morning, Dina Morris. I too would like to know what it's costing per license for this agreement, and I didn't quite catch if this agreement includes the initial license and all upgrades thereafter, because that would make a huge difference as to whether we feel that this is a good bargain or not, depending on how many licenses. Like 100 licenses versus 1,000 licenses. So if we could get that question answered, that would help clear up confusion for some of us. I would appreciate that. And I too, like Bill, would like to know if this enterprise agreement is something that has held back our prior requests for the GIS mapping that Bill was talking about. Or is this completely unrelated to that? I know that there are many of us that have been waiting a long time to see, a long time to see the information that we've requested with the mapping of the cannabis. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll close public comments. Mr. Moore, you want to answer some of the questions we heard?
Thanks everyone for the questions. All very good questions. The relationship between the Microsoft agreement and the questions that have been brought up on the GIS side with the topographical and so on, there's no relationship to that. That's different software. That's through our GIS software. That's through our Esri software. You're absolutely right. There has been an upgrade that has been going on within the GIS side with our Esri software. Some of the topographical, some of the topo capabilities that we had in different topic, but they went away when we had a problem with unsupported software. We have upgraded the software. We haven't gotten back to the point of adding those topo capabilities in, but we can at least do that. So that was one of the questions. Another question had to do with being able to map. From a system standpoint, the capability exists, and certainly in working with a number of the different agencies around the county, the planning department, and administration, a number of areas. Where there is information that's available, we can put it into GIS. From a software standpoint, we can certainly do that. Question was raised on do we get more than virus upgrades and so on? Yes, we do. There is a fair amount of consulting time that is baked into this that we would not otherwise have, so that we can reach out to Microsoft in a number of areas and get their expertise brought in. The number of licenses and the price, those are all in the board packet. These are not to purchase the license. When we purchase the license, there is, depending on when we purchase it, we will purchase a license. I'm getting into way too much detail. It does not include that. These are for licenses that we already have. We have an ability to purchase more licenses. These are
Sandy,
for licenses that we already have.
Can you make sure you're talking into the microphone so everybody can hear?
Sorry. Okay. So these are for licenses that we already own. There's a number of line items here that are for licenses on personal computers and licenses on servers. I don't know that it makes a great deal of sense to go through in this and go through all of those items. It's information that's available in the board packet. These are discounted prices. This is the best price that we can get. So
CAO?
If I could add, since you had mentioned it was in the board item, I figured I'd pull it up for sake of clarity. In looking at it, this does include a number of different items. In terms of Office Pro, which I think is what people were asking about, how many, Office licenses and the cost, I'm showing that line item as $79 per license, and that's for Office Pro. Now, there are a number of other items, as you alluded to, including our server licenses, the special type of enterprise suite that we would put on our server. Added value to this piece, I would add that we're working with departments to make sure that they're making use of this is free training, which is one of the key things for people coming in and staying on top of their skill set with any of the Office suite. Microsoft has an extensive training database that this gives all of our staff access to, which saves us tremendous in having to send people to an Excel class or an Access class or other areas that provide software training.
Any other board questions? I'll look for a motion.
I'll move the item.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, item number 12.
Item 12 is from Human Resources to adopt a resolution approving modifications to the Service Employees International Union Local 1021 MOU.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Judy Hawkins, Human Resources and Risk Director. I am very happy to bring to you today a modified Memorandum of Understanding for SEIU. We have been in negotiations since March 2017. We did come to an agreement for a short-term contract in 2017 and then went back into negotiations in October. I want to also thank the SEIU 1021 bargaining team. They worked hard with the county to come to this agreement. And some of the highlights of the agreement that I'm bringing before you for approval is we had some clarification in language regarding office closures, minimum increments to be used toward vacation, and then we also have a reopener upon request in October to discuss any changes toward benefits. One of the items that was heavily discussed, of course, is wages. The Human Resources Department had started a classification study last year, and we reviewed all positions that were 15 to 20% below average and gave those positions a 5% equity increase. And those will go into effect in March of this year. We've agreed upon a 2% COLA that will be effective the pay period starting June 23rd, and so that will hit the first check in July. And then a second 2% COLA, which will be effective January 5th, 2019. And so the financing for this, the SEIU unit is made up primarily of non-general fund departments. And so the general fund, I apologize, to back up a little bit, we also agreed upon picking up 100% of the employee-only dental and 100% of the employee-only vision. And that will go into effect the beginning of July 2018. And so the financing of these for the general fund, dental and vision, breaks down to be just over $40,000. The non-general fund for dental and vision, $92,000. The general fund equity increases and COLA, $206,000, and the non-general fund equity increases and COLA, just over $481,000. So the total annual increases to just general fund will be $246,967. The changes for fiscal year 2017-18 is just over $5,000.
Thank you, Judy. Any board? Yes, Supervisor Mills.
Chair, can I ask for a 5-minute break to talk to council?
A 5-minute recess? Sure. We're recessed for 5 minutes. Okay, we're back. So, do we have any supervisor questions? No? Mr. Oliveira?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we accept the agreement with SEIU as negotiated by the County of Calaveras.
I will second that.
Okay, before we call for a vote, though, we need to open it for public comment. Is there any public comments on this issue?
I feel like a jack in the box. I thought that the union, when they settled, the vote was 103 to 21, and the expense to the county was going to be $1 million for the 2018-2019, and another $1 million for the 2021. Maybe I read the wrong thing, but I'd like to know about it.
I just had 2 questions. How long is this contract for? Is it like a 2-year contract, a 1-year contract? And the $246,000, is that the increase in 1 year to cover the employees' increases?
Is there any other public comment? Hold on, Judy.
I have a couple. The first one is I'm in favor for this. I don't think it's enough. I think these workers need more than what they're getting. Also, I'd also like to call point of order. Can we get some sort of explanation as to what just happened back there and why there was more than, or why there was 3 supervisors back there at one time?
Any other public comment? If not, I'll close public comment. Judy, you want to answer the questions that you had, Can?
Yes, the contract expiration, as stated on here, goes to December 31st, 2019, and we will start negotiations again in September of 2019. And the cost of the contract, it is the 246 is an annual cost to the general fund. 70% of SEIU is non-general fund, and so that is an annual cost to the general fund. And then the fiscal year 2017-18 is an increase of the $5,000.
Okay. County Council, do you want to answer the other question?
Just for clarification purposes, a single board member asked to speak with me at the break. I pulled him aside. It was a communication, just one single board member and council. Any other board members that went through that door was going to separate areas down the corridor. They were not part of the discussion. There were not any meetings with multiple board members in any way, shape, or form. It was a single meeting between one supervisor and council. Mm-hmm.
Bring it to the board. Do I have a motion? A motion. We have a motion and a second. I'm sorry. Any other further discussion? If not, call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Madam Clerk.
Item 13 is from Human Resources to adopt a resolution approving modifications to the Deputy Sheriff's Association MOU for January 1, 2018 to June 30th, 2019.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Judy Hawkins, Human Resources Director of Human Resources and Risk Management. Once again, I am bringing before you a modified MOU for the Deputy Sheriff's Association. I do want to thank the bargaining team of the Deputy Sheriff's Association. We were able to come to an agreement for a modified MOU which will expire June 30th, 2019. We were able to come to the agreement on adding to their 2% assignment pay for the search and rescue team members, bomb team, and dive team. We've increased their uniform pay by $75 to be effective upon adoption of the agreement, the full first pay period after adoption of agreement. And then we also agreed on the equity 7.5% equity increase. We also identified that our deputy sheriffs were, their average was out 29%. They were the highest in the county for being, the equity being out of line from our comparison counties. And so we have agreed to a 7.5% equity increase effective March 3rd for all the positions within the deputy sheriffs were out of line. A 2% COLA, and they will also be paying back 2% PERS toward the employee's PERS rate. This was also effective at the same first pay period, which will be effective June 23rd, 2018. They will get an additional equity increase of 7.5% for the positions that are listed, and that will be effective September 29th, 2018, and then they will receive another $75 toward their uniform allowance effective January of 2019. And one of the things with the uniform allowances for our Deputy Sheriff's Association is they often have to have additional uniforms for the additional teams that they are on, such as search and rescue, bomb, and dive. The additional cost for these, the general fund is $817,553. The increase to the budget for 17-18 will be $142,907.
Any board member questions? Supervisor Clapp, your light is on?
None.
No. If not, I'll open it up to public comments. Do we have any public comments, questions?
George Fry. Well, I'm glad to hear that. What I want to know is what are the deputies that get hired? Are they getting in? How much more are they getting than the $23.50 an hour, as opposed to what they're doing with the Stockton PD, who are looking for 50 law enforcement officers?
Any other public comment?
Morning, Board. Morning, Chair. I would just like to say that I would like to thank the union folks here in the county, all the employees, sheriffs, for stepping up during the Butte fire. They took a hold on their contract negotiations for a year and a half because of the catastrophe that we had. And in my opinion, right now, what they're getting is for this raise is probably not enough because I think that we have some of the best employees anywhere for the sacrifices they made for us during that fire. So that's just my opinion.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Judy?
I have not compared our rates to the Stockton PD. We, as far as our new rates, and so I don't have an answer for those questions at this time.
Okay.
So what is the hourly rate as a new deputy under the new contract?
Off the top of, I apologize, I did not bring the spreadsheet with me with the new schedules.
Okay, so any other board questions, comments before I ask for a motion?
Yeah, the only comment that I would have is that it is a difficult time in California with law enforcement, but it's also a difficult time in California for the fire service. So we're in essence competing for the same workforce, and most people understand that. They're going to try to find the place that they're the most comfortable, and their work experience as well as their quality of life is balanced. So I appreciate very much those that are willing to be here and work in Calaveras County, but we do need to understand that there is a larger need, and that maybe we start to look at an opportunity to address how that need is fulfilled. Now, with the fire departments, they've put together programs to help make all of that work for them and maintain a reasonable staffing on a volunteer level. It's very different than when you're paid, but it's something that I think that the board needs to look at, is how do we encourage people to join our law enforcement here? How do we keep them here on the longer term? And maybe it needs an innovative approach, something that we may not have looked at before.
Supervisor Oliveira, your light's on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, it's no secret that I'm pro-law enforcement. This is a huge step in retaining the talent and the resources we need for the Calaveras County. This is a wonderful place to be a law enforcement officer. I can honestly say that, coming from a big city police department called Oakland, California. And I must say, this is a step to solidifying public safety in Calaveras County. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Garamendi.
I also thank you, Judy, Flora, and all staff for helping put this together. I know you've been negotiating this for well over 6 months. A very difficult time. So thanks for holding the rudder steady as we navigated this. And Tim, thank you as well. 17% raise is a good step in the right direction. I do continue to have concerns about how we're going to pay it, but at the same time, it is what we need to pay our deputies for the work that they do and moving forward. So we'll figure it out, and we'll keep the community safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I agree. I want to thank you too. I want to thank the team. I want to thank CAO Lutz for involvement in this, also the DSA. And I share the sentiments of both Garamendi and Oliveira, Supervisors Garamendi and Supervisor Oliveira. I think this is a step in the right direction.
Great.
So that being said, I call for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I so move that we accept negotiations between the DSA and the County of Calaveras.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, item 14.
Item 14 is from the Board of Supervisors to appoint applicants, the appointment of applicants to serve on various committees, commissions, advisory boards, and county service areas.
I have just been asked to take a break, so we're going to take a 10-minute break. All right, we're back in session. Madam Clerk, you read?
So we are on item number 14, which is the appointment of applicants to serve on various committees, commissions, advisory board, and county service areas. Customarily, what we do is we read off all of the vacancies that have applications for consideration at today's meeting, and we act on them all, the board acts on them all at one time. So I just want to throw out there, is there any of these appointments that the board would like to have pulled out to act upon separately?
Chair, I do.
Yes.
Since my wife is one of those that you'll be deciding on, even though it's not a Brown Act violation to me, for me to vote on that issue, I would prefer to recuse during that. So if you'd like to take the IHSS first, I will step outside for that vote and then come back in for the rest of it.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we,
you wanna vote on-
why don't we go through all of them and pull IHSS off of it for right now?
Okay,
And then if we get a motion for the rest of them, and then we'll,
separate. Thank you.
okay, so we are removing IHSS right now,
I'd like to remove CSA 1.
the whole CSA one, okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
could we ask Madam Clerk to indicate those positions where they have multiple candidates and only limited seats? Is there any conflict in that?
No, I would absolutely do that as part of the
Okay.
process.
Yeah,
Thank
she
you.
reads them when we go through them.
Are there any else that you would like to have acted upon separately? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and read through the rest of them, and then when we get to the one that Supervisor Clapp would like removed, that's County Service Area 1, and the one that Supervisor Mills would like removed, IHSS Advisory Committee, I will let you know at that time. So the first vacancy that we have an application for is for the Area 12 Agency on Aging. It's one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/21, the member 3 position, and George Fry has submitted an application, and he was the incumbent last year. The next would be the Fish and Game Commission. We have one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/18 for the District 1 Member 1 position, and an application has been received from Grant Randy Metzger, who served previously. We have one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/18 for the District 2 Member 2 position, and we have 2 applications. One is from Gordon Long, who served in the last year and previous years, and so is considered the incumbent. The other is an application from Ashley Skeen. Also for the Fish and Game Commission, we have one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/18 for a District 5 Member 2 position, and we have an application from Louis Olivas. For the Law Library Board of Trustees, we have one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/18 for an Attorney 1 or General Public member. And we have an application from Stephen Salente, who served previously and is considered the incumbent. We have an application for a vacancy on the Mental Health Board, and that vacancy is for a term expiring 12/31/20 for a General Public Representative 5. Christopher Williams has served previously and is considered the incumbent, and his application is before you today. For the McCullum Hill Cemetery District, we have one vacancy for an unexpired term ending 12/31/21, Member 3, and that is for Ninette Scherer, who is the incumbent. We have a vacancy on the Solid Waste Task Force, which is for a term expiring 12/31/19. For General Public Member 2, Janet Osa has submitted her application and is considered the incumbent. And we have 2 vacancies on the Vallecito Cemetery District Board, one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/21 for Member 2, and one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/21, Member 3. We have applications from Julie Hollers and Ginger Malatesta, respectively, and they are both considered incumbents.
So the only one that we have multiple applicants on would be the Fish and Game in District 2.
That is correct.
So Supervisor Garamendi, that is your district?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Gordon Long, who's the incumbent. Sir? Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Gordon Long, who's an incumbent. Having reviewed both applications. Thank you.
Okay. So do we have any public comment at this time in any of those? No public comment. Bring it back to the board. Do I hear a motion to accept the applicants as read by the board clerk and adding the one Gordon Long Fish and Game as the incumbent and directed by Supervisor Garamendi.
So moved.
I have a motion by Supervisor Garamendi.
I'd second that.
We have a second. Supervisor Clapp. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. We will now go to County Service Area Number 1. You're going to recuse yourself?
Yes, on that one I am.
This applicant is your son?
Yeah, I've known him for like 30 years.
Okay.
How well?
So just to read into the record,
Surprises me once in a while.
County Service Area 1, Rancho Calaveras, one vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/18 for Member 3. An application has been received from Kevin Ost.
Any comments from the board? Any public comments? If not, bring it back to the board. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Supervisor Mills, you are recusing yourself for the next item.
That's correct.
Could you ask Supervisor Clapp to come back? He did. He stated at the beginning when he asked it to be pulled that his wife is one of the applicants.
And I stand corrected, do I not? This has 3 applicants for 2 seats.
Yes, it is, and I'm going to read those into the record. Okay, so for the IHSS Advisory Committee, we have several vacancies and several applications. The first is for 2 vacancies for a term expiring 12/31/19 for General Public Representative 2 and 3. We have 3 applications for the 2 vacancies. The first application is from George Fry, who has currently served on the committee and is considered the incumbent. We also have an application from Vicki Mills, who has served on the committee and is considered the incumbent. And we have an additional application from Robert Walsh. The next, we have 1 vacancy for a term ending 12/31/19 for a past or present consumer 4. We have an application from Bonnie Newman, who is the incumbent. We have 1 vacancy for a term expiring 12/31/19 for a current or previous provider. We have an application from Marty Crane, who is the incumbent. So we would need a recommendation, or there would need to be a motion specifically for the 2 vacancies for the general public for 2 of the 3 applications.
Mr. Chair, are any candidates present on this particular nomination for this position?
So for this one, where there are 3 applications for the 2, Mr. Fry is present.
The other 2 are not.
That's correct.
Any conversation?
Would it be proper to hear from those candidates, or is it required they be present? Then I would draw my request to hear from them, in all fairness.
You what?
I was going to request to hear from the candidates, but if they're not all here, I withdraw the request.
We do not require them to be present when they submit an application.
I have no questions, Mr. Chair.
You have another question?
I have no
No
questions,
further
sir.
Well, we need to deliberate on who we would like to see. We have 3 for 2 seats.
Well, Mr. Fry has been a volunteer most of his life, I think.
40 years is what he said earlier.
I sometimes experience is some of the best qualities, but we understand that there is some problems with that committee. Hopefully we're on the right track to get them squared away.
I think my opinion is it's Jack's committee. I'd like for him to pick them. He has to work with them.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have not attended one of the meetings yet, and the first meeting is next week. Mr. Clapp represented last year, so I do know George, and certainly done well. I think he's done a good job from interactions I've seen, but I've not attended one of these meetings yet.
Does anybody here know Robert Walsh? Know who he is? Yeah, I'll tell
Mr.
you
Chair,
what.
would it be proper to solicit information from the gallery here on Mr. Walsh? I don't know of anything of him also.
Well, I'll tell you what, before we bring, I'll open it up to public comments. Why don't we do that? And then when we come back after your public comments, we'll have a further discussion on it. Okay, so I'll open for public comments.
Marty Crane. I serve as a secretary for the IHSS Advisory Committee, and our goal is to reach out and find new and more engaged voices. So we put out a newsletter, and Mr. Walsh responded and was pretty excited about being on the committee. I think that's all I know about him, is that that he seemed very engaged and wanted to be part of it. So, thank you.
Good afternoon. Beth Whitkey, D2. I serve with George Fry on the Council on Aging, and I find him to be an exemplary board member. He shows up on time, prepared. I've never seen him miss a meeting, and I just think he's an excellent community servant. So I would definitely love to see him carry on in his position. Thank you.
As a vice chair of the committee, Robert Walsh did reach out after our newsletter was produced in September, indicating an interest in serving on the committee. At that time, there were no vacancies, so he held his application until the beginning of the year, but indicated he had intended to attend the meetings, but with many home care workers, his client got in the way at that time. So I was surprised and heartened that he did follow through with filling out his application and submitting it. So I think all candidates should be considered. Thank you.
Good morning again. I serve as the chair currently of the in-home supportive services, and to respond to Supervisor Oliveira's comment with regard to how the in-home supportive services is doing. We're doing really well, and we have a really good cross-section of people on in-home supportive services, and I'm really pleased with what has transpired in this past year, not just because I'm the chair, but because we are doing a lot of good things. So that's probably all I have to say. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Megan Guthrie. I'm on IHSS. I'm pretty new, and I'm really thankful for George being the chair and taking leadership. And there's 2 or 3 new board members on, and hopefully in the past we've had some bumps in roads, but I really think that there's a nice cross-section now, and hopefully we're going to move forward and get something done. And I really think George has done a great job.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Now, Mr. Chair, I'd like to clarify my statement. I have to draw on the experience of the last board, and when I mentioned problems with this particular committee, I've seen the progress, and there were some bumps and grinds, if you will, hills and valleys, but I think they're on the right road to getting it back together and doing a good job.
So, do we have a motion with selections?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, to reappoint George Fry.
I would second that.
We need another candidate from the 2 remaining.
You could vote on this
We can
one,
vote on the
and then
George
you
Fry?
can vote on the
Okay, I have
next.
a
Sure.
motion and a second for George Fry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0 with one abstention.
Thank you.
You're welcome, George.
So that would, the remaining applications would be from Vicki Mills, who is considered the incumbent, and from Robert Walsh. Would you like any of the information from their applications, experience, or?
Mr. Chair, I've reviewed both applications, but I'm quite interested in the fact that Mr. Walsh not only applied back in October, but he's still reapplying. And Ms. Crane, when she stated that, or Mr. Fry stated that he was taking care of in-home patients during that time, that really impressed me. And I don't know the gentleman, and I have to go on the opinions stated here. And I think the two opinions are well qualified to state those opinions. So I would be encouraged to bring Mr. Walsh on board.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, is that a motion?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Walsh. The selection for the second position on the in-home service.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. We'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0-1. Supervisor Clapp, can you ask Mr. Mills to?
Wait, we have to vote on the rest.
Yeah, but I don't think does he need to recuse himself from the other two since we've already voted?
He's off.
Arguably, the conflict was for the general public representative 2 and 3. So arguably the other remaining positions on IHSS, there isn't a conflict, but I would defer to Supervisor Mills on whether he would want to participate in that
You want to ask him?
vote or not.
There's only two of them.
He says he referred.
He preferred to stay out there?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a motion for the remaining two vacancies on this committee. Bonnie Newman and Marty Crane.
Also move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0-1.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to thank the board members for selecting Mr. Walsh. I think it's good that we have new blooded, and he is taking care of a person, and I thank the board for that.
Thank you.
I just also, Marty Crane, I just want to say thank you. And yes, we have had some bumps along, and there are many more things that we need to do. And we desperately need our governing board to know what we do, to understand where we're going and what we need from you, and to have a strong voice to help us. So,
Okay, thank
in the
you.
future, I just want to say thank you.
Okay.
Also my thanks, but to let you know that 2 of our consumers passed away this last year. So we
Okay.
have 2 vacancies. Please help us fill those
Thank you.
positions.
All right, let's move on, Madam Clerk.
Supervisor Clapp, could you ask
Did you-
Supervisor Mills
did
to
you-
come
did you-
back?
no.
Supervisor announcements. In compliance with AB 1234, Chapter does Government Code Section 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on meetings they attended at the expense of the local agency at the next regular meeting of the legislative body. This report is required to include meetings attended for which there has been expense reimbursement, mileage, meals, lodging, etc., but may also, at the board member's discretion, include any other meeting attended by the supervisor on behalf of the county.
Okay. Supervisor's comments. Do we have, we'll start with Supervisor Clapp.
Yeah, I attended my CSA number 1 meeting, and then I also attended La Catena Homeowners Association, for which they had about 150 people show up, which was unheard of. And then a real interesting one is Olive Orchard. There's 50 homes that are actually now people's living in them. And I met with them Sunday evening, and they're trying to get a CSA something because the roads are in good shape now. They would like to keep them there. So I'll probably be meeting with Tim probably within the week or next week with one of their representatives and stuff, so they can form something so they can start paying for the roads.
Supervisor Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I attended the RCRC meeting on the 17th in Sacramento. A particular interest to this board is we discussed the Merrill bond, which is going to be probably be on the November ballot. It's complementary to SB5, which is the park bond. It provides about $200+ million in this bond for watershed protections, and so that'll have a major impact on us since we're obviously a major watershed. I was elected vice chair of the water committee for RCRC, which was a great honor, and I'm looking forward to that work. And we had a reception there installing the new officers. I also had a great meeting with Red Cross and the Public Health Department, as well as Assistant CAO Brian Moss joined us up in West Point. We talked a lot about emergency preparedness and practice. And so I think we made good progress with the new Director of Public Health, Colleen. And so I think we're really going to make some progress and try to get some practice and really make sure we're coordinated. Everybody's trying to take the lessons from the Butte fire and make sure that we're better prepared for the next time. And then also I attended the crab feed on this Saturday at San Andreas Town Hall for the Friends of the Calaveras Sheriff's Office. Thank you.
Supervisor Mills.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had staff attend the Foothill Fire Safe Council meeting in Murphy's, where Cam from CAL FIRE did a presentation on the status of fuel breaks in Calaveras County. The one thing that came out of it was a concern that those fuel breaks are not being maintained adequately, but he did go through some of the areas where things are starting to work. There is up there in Blue Lake Springs, I think Supervisor Oliveira is aware of that, but that fuel break is going to go all the way down to Utica.
That's correct.
And that's really a very big deal. Also, the SRA funding, no more advances. They're only going to work with monthly billing to the state, but they are still continuing with the door-to-door chipper program and the tree mortality program. There are new California Climate Investment Forest Health grants that are going to be coming out February 21st and February 26th. And I think that they're also going to do on February 28th a field trip on Summit Level Road for anyone that's interested in that, to just kind of see what that looks like. I talked to SPI and Mark Luster about whether or not we can work as a public-private partnership with them on forest health and a master stewardship agreement very similar to what Tuolumne County has put together, and he's very interested in that. And he said that the major drawback that they're experiencing right now is the delays due to having to do the environmental work for their projects. Also had an opportunity to go to the local hazard mitigation plan update for Calaveras County Water District. That is another one that has to blend very well with our general plan update, and we should probably have somebody from our staff at that next meeting just to be sure that we are in that conversation with them. It's interesting too is that what came out of that is having these districts put together their plans on environmental studies and resource studies so that they can get their NEPA and CEQAs pretty well done in advance. Even if they go stale, they would just need to be updated, and the result is there would be less delay in processing on an emergency grant. Also had an opportunity for Murphy Sanitary District. The staff up there is now changed over a little bit, and the staff is coming up with some great ideas to save money. They were thinking about the cost to put in a valve going across to Stephen Couts and the winery over there, and instead they did some research and they actually found a valve buried, so now they don't have to bear the expense. But there's other things that they're doing. So they're working very closely with the winery, and it's a big win-win situation for both sides for them. So that's just a quick summary of the things that have gone on.
Supervisor Oliveira.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat the information by Supervisor Mills, but these committees kind of interlock together with the Tree Mortality Task Force, both the Governor's Task Force and our local task force. It's a joint effort, if you will, especially the fire breaks. They're very important. Funding is very important, and we have to secure that funding when available immediately. We have to do that through several avenues or several organizations, and I'm very happy to say that we are, as Calaveras County, aggressively going after that funding and those grants. We will be doing some other things. Snow is here, hopefully Thursday, I hope. And that comes with winter driving. I want to draw attention to our driving here in Calaveras County. Folks, we've been experiencing hellacious accidents. And to put a finger on it, I really can't. Who is it? We don't know. All we know is human beings that are dying on our highways. So I'm going to beg both of you, all of us, take that extra minute to get where you need to go and be cautious. We don't have a safety net to throw over us. This could happen to anyone. So I ask you to take care of yourself and take care of your loved ones. We've got some adverse weather coming. With that, I also attended the sheriff's office, actually the Friends of the Sheriff's crab feed, had a great time, and good socializing. Even had some of my fellow supervisors. We did not discuss issues, but it was good to meet socially once in a while. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. I was given a note by Bonnie Newman to, Gary, please announce the Blue Moon, Blood Moon, and Super Moon on Wednesday, January 31st. So if we have clear skies, go outside and enjoy it. It won't happen for a million years. And so that's all I have on the report.
First time in 150 years.
Still in my lifetime.
So I will open it up to general public comments.
Is that a super blue blood moon?
Super blue blood.
Mike Falvey, a resident of Calaveras County since the mid-'70s. I came to my first Board of Supervisor meeting in the late '70s, let's say, so I've been ever since. Now that I'm retired, more than when I was working. Just first an observation. I found it interesting that when ex-Supervisor Thomas approached the board, or the speaker here, he was recognized as being an ex-supervisor and welcomed. When Supervisor Edson approached, he was neither recognized or welcomed.
And you're correct, and I apologize for that. I should have recognized.
Okay, I was just wondering.
That's my fault. I apologize.
Okay.
Well, we'll take it.
And my second is an observation, referring back to some of Mr. Thomas's comments, and again, being a longtime observer of the board, just touching on him. He's the one that brought up as an ex-supervisor and a member of the CCWD, so the gentleman has a lot of experience in public meetings, public service, et cetera, et cetera. We all know that. For a person like that to approach the board and say what he said to the board and Ms. Stedfeld County Council, I think you guys ought to, and ma'am, ought to take what he said into serious consideration as far as maybe some censorship is involved. And besides that, not to allow this board to deteriorate into a bully pulpit at times, because it doesn't look good. So I would hope that, A, the county council will take the advice of Mr. Thomas, which I think was very well thought out, and B, will also act on their own actions. Because again, being an observer of the board for 40 years, again, you're on the edge here. You're teetering in the eyes of public perception. So just a bit of advice.
Hello, gentlemen, ladies. My name's Jeremy Maddox. 1979, we moved here. I'm a longtime resident. My mother and father live in the Murphy's Diggins right now, currently. He's an electrical engineer, retired from the government. I have a bachelor's degree in biology and English. I taught school after graduating college here at Christian Family Learning Center for 2 years. I built custom homes in Grizzly Ridge and Arnold. I worked as a firefighter for Murphy's as an EMT for several years. I have 4 kids with my wife, Michelle. She couldn't be here today, she's sick. She's a psychotherapist. And our 4 kids are freshmen at Bret Harte. Our oldest is dancing American Ballet Theater in New York, Manhattan daily. It's expensive. We live here and we love it. I've lived a lot of other places briefly, and I always come back. I want good-hearted neighbors. I want what's best for everyone. I want people to be treated fairly. And I want to pay taxes in this cannabis industry that we have. I've been doing this for 8 years, supplying California dispensaries, and I expect it to continue. You want hundreds of guys like me and families like me in this county, and that's why we're here. To the Honorable Dennis Mills, pursuant to Section 11020, California Elections Code, the undersigned registered qualified voters of the 4th Supervisor District of Calaveras County in the state of California hereby give notice that we are the proponents of a recall petition and that we intend to seek your recall and removal from the office of Calaveras County Supervisor in District 4, and to demand election of a successor in that office. The grounds for the recall are as follows. Dennis Mills has brought a personal agenda to his office and demonstrated a blatant disregard for the health and safety of Calaveras County, its citizens, and businesses. His crusade for a ban of commercial cannabis has invited devastating lawsuits against the county that can result in bankruptcy and lead to unrestrained illegal cannabis cultivation throughout Calaveras. He refuses to inform the public despite repeated requests of the real cost to the county, residents, and taxpayers arising from his ban on this commercial cannabis. These may include higher property taxes for everyone, underfunding of county services, loss of millions of dollars in Measure C, firing of up to 22 county employees, including sheriff deputies, and ending the current successful Calaveras County Civil Abatement Program. Evidence of Mr. Mills engaging in the Brown Act violations have surfaced, thus undermining public trust in our local government. And finally, Mr. Mills has made disparaging remarks and baseless allegations against county staff during public meetings and walked out of the room during public comments, thus eroding public trust that our government functions fairly and impartially for all our residents. Mr. Mills is a divisive politician and should not continue to serve as a Calaveras County Supervisor. Mr. Mills, you've been served.
You can't, you have.
He actually has to do the service. You have to let him do the service.
Can I serve him the document?
No, you cannot approach the bench. No, you
I
can't.
was informed it was possibly able to just hand him this document.
He physically has to serve.
Mr. Mills.
You'll have to do it. You'll have to do it outside.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
a procedural matter in this. County Council,
Point of order.
Is there a substitute service in this particular matter? Can be served on the board clerk? Let's take a break and discuss this.
We will take a break right now.
We gotta do it right.
All right, we're back. County Council.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. It's my understanding that Supervisor Mills, during the break, did go and receive service. Our practice is that no one can come forward to the dais. But for the record, Elections Code 11021 does state that a copy of the notice of intent shall be served by personal delivery or by certified mail on the officer sought to be recalled. So I cannot and I will not provide legal service to any proponent, but for purposes of the board, that is what the election code says. But for today's purposes, it appears that Supervisor Mills has already handled it. So we can move forward.
So we'll move on with public comment.
Marty Crane, I had 3 things that I wanted to share, and I lost one of them back there in the back of the room somehow. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you, Supervisor Garamendi, for leading the charge on emergency preparedness, meeting with Red Cross, public health. I've been singing at the moon for years on this, and I'm just very grateful that we have more examples in the Butte Fire, though. We have lots of examples, so, and I know you know that, so thank you for that. And I wanted to say that I'm 68 years old. I've been a woman that entire time, and I know what I know. We never had names for it, though. We just put up with it. We just went, oh, it's a man's world, Martha. Just sit down, you're a girl, nobody cares what you think. I asked a gazillion questions then. I still do. Nothing's changed. Sorry. And so when they said it's a man's world, we knew exactly what they meant. But I fought it all my life. Sadly, most of my sisters bought into it, you know, and they've spent many, many years getting out of that. So I wanted to say that on Saturday, the charming husband joined me at the Women's March in Sacramento. And it's called Women's March because the women have finally decided we are here. We are part of the conversation. It's no longer acceptable that you don't listen and then hear what we're saying. And that's, I'm not just saying you, I'm talking everyone. So we're taking back our voice. We're going to claim it. And I just wanted to say that, and I lost it again, I'm sorry, that it's a new day. And I appreciate every man who gets it, and every woman who was raised by enlightened parents or who has overcome all of that. And looking out amongst the crowd, it had to be over 30,000 people. But we've never gotten all of Calaveras together, so I'm not quite sure what that looks like, but it sure felt like it. And it was way more than last year, and last year was unbelievable. So looking out over the crowd this year, I have to say that at least half of the people there were men and children. It was inspiring, it was positive, and if you as representatives want to know what your constituents are feeling passionate about, look it up, look at the signs. They're speaking out. So anyway, thank you again, and thank you for the steps for emergency preparedness. Thank you.
Sandy Maitrat, District 2. I'd like to acknowledge the good work recently done by the county's marijuana enforcement team involving an unregistered indoor cannabis grow in the 6,000 block of Highway 26 in Valley Springs. This is another instance where deputies found the entire house converted for indoor cultivation. Moisture intrusion in the ceiling, walls, and flooring material promoted widespread mold and fungus as reported. There were photographs of roof rafters infested with mold growth. These photos were concerning to me, as is the health of those involved in this abatement. I stand before you as someone who can attest to the long-term health effects of mold exposure. I was exposed to high concentrations of aspergillus, penicillium, cladosporium, and eulocladium. Within 24 hours of exposure, I was reacting. It started with headaches, sinus congestion, and a cough. That cough became chronic very quickly, and the sinus congestion turned to nosebleeds. I became fatigued, experienced vertigo, had difficulty concentrating, and lived with muscle and joint pains, as well as constant gastric upset. I found Dr. Marinkovich, an immunologist nationally known as Dr. Mold, Through his masked allergy blood test, it was determined all my symptoms were related to my exposure. I underwent treatment, which included a rigid diet plan. I had to watch everything I ate. Something as simple as ketchup was no longer allowed because the preservative used, citric acid, is made from the skim of an Aspergillus mold vat. No grains, no dairy, anything with refined sugar or excess fructose was out. My meats had to be butchered fresh and eaten within 24 hours. It was pretty daunting, and it took nearly 6 years to resolve. Why do I share this? The ban that 3 of you passed on cannabis cultivation that forces what little remains of the industry indoors presents a health risk. Your ordinance contains no established ventilation requirements. Few understand how water is actually, or how little water is actually required to foster mold, or how it fingers out and runs and can spread, ultimately causing mold to propagate widely. Today's energy-efficient homes are primed for mold because they are airtight. Those of you on the board who supported moving cultivation indoors have no idea what you may have created. You've traded one type of environmental disaster for another. You're exposing abatement teams to something very dangerous. If you question how insidious the problem is you potentially have created, I would encourage you to look up the names Melinda Ballard and Ron Allison. Their case was extreme and resulted in a $32 million jury verdict. This is evidence that mold should not be taken lightly. If you insist on enforcing what little cultivation you allow to remain in Calaveras County indoors, please understand the risks involved, especially when you've established an ordinance.
Thank you.
Rapana Randall Smith, District 3. I'm going to read to you from a little bit of writing that's published on a website for the University of Santa Clara University, written by an expert in public government ethics, Hannah Callahan. And in this article, it's published in the www.scu.edu/ethics/focus areas/government ethics/resources/public officials as fiduciaries. Now, sometimes just because something is legal doesn't mean it's necessarily ethical. And as public officials, you all have several duties. Several of those are the duty of care, loyalty, impartiality, duty of accountability, and I'm going to talk about right now duty to preserve the public trust in government. Without public trust, government doesn't work. The public is willing to delegate authority and sacrifice some freedoms in exchange for an orderly and civilized society, but only if it believes that government is acting in the public's best interest. When the public loses trust in government, public cooperation suffers, compliance with laws fail, and investors and consumers lose confidence. To quote President Obama, if the people cannot trust their government to do the job for which it exists, to protect them and to promote their common welfare, all else is lost. Trust in government is so important, public fiduciaries are charged with protecting them and maintaining the public trust. Towards this end, as stewards of the public trust, public fiduciaries have a duty to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. That is to say, even if a particular course of conduct does not meet all the elements necessary to constitute a violation of law, it necessarily may be unethical if it creates the perception of wrongdoing that will do harm to the public trust. Notions of civility and respect towards colleagues and the public also ensure the public's trust in the efficiency and effectiveness of government. When animus is displayed by council members towards each other, it causes the public to wonder if private feuds are taking precedence over the common welfare. When constituents are treated with a lack of respect, it causes the public to doubt the fairness of the proceedings. As nicely summed up by the City of Portland, Oregon, public service requires a continual effort to overcome cynical attitudes and suspicions about people in government. I bring this up because we have seen in this room dismal failures of your fiduciary duties by certain members of this body. We've seen people walk out during public comment. We've seen attacks by one supervisor upon another, engaging in public electioneering. Can't do that. Please consider your ethics and your fiduciary duties. Thank you.
couple weeks ago, a majority of this board, including Supervisor Tofinelli, elected Supervisor Tofinelli to the chair, despite the fact that a D2 supervisor hasn't held this position for the past 9 years. Furthermore, the supervisor from D2 has held the position of vice chair 4 consecutive years, with the once reasonable expectation of rotating into the chair every time. The past 3 elections have been in the wake of the Butte fire, when D2 most needed and deserved this leadership position. And in my limited experience, generally after the clerk reads the next agendized order of business, after some preamble, the chair would say something like, "I will entertain a motion," and a motion might follow. In this case of the election, Supervisor Clapp made a nomination just as the clerk finished reading the agenda item. Neither the sitting chair nor any member of the public raised any point of order, so maybe there wasn't one. But I did note Chairman Oliveira later said he had nominations he intended to make at the appropriate time, but then went on to call for a vote. Rule 23 of the board's Rules of Procedure says, "A board member wishing to speak shall refrain until he or she has been recognized by the chair, and, consistent with the purpose of the rules, members are encouraged to use a formal style including appropriate titles in addressing the public, staff, and each other." To my sensibilities, everything about the way this election took place seemed amiss. So I submitted a simple question to the FPPC for clarification, that being, should a member of a board recuse him or herself from voting on their own elections as board chair when the position involves a significant salary increase? As you know, last week I read and forwarded you all an email through the board clerk containing the response from senior counsel at the FPPC that stated unambiguously, a supervisor voting on his own behalf for the position of board chair is prohibited under Regulation 18704D3, and after a brief closed session, County Council returned and cited the same line of regulation to defend this practice that the FPPC cited to say it was prohibited. I have to skip a bunch of this. So I went ahead and notified the FPPC of this decision, and this is not intended to single out Supervisor Tofinelli, but to challenge a long-standing board policy. For me, the denial of the chair was the straw that broke the camel's back. When we were rotating the chair through the districts, no one would have thought to bring up any of this. It wasn't an issue. But when it's a mere formality, procedural details are relatively inconsequential. But after 9 years, we're not talking about an isolated incident. This is a distinct pattern. When the chair becomes a hotly contested position, it looks to the public like board members aren't working together for the common good, but are forming factions.
Thank you.
Joan Tanner Wilson, District 1. To the Honorable Gary Tofinelli, pursuant to Section 11020 California Elections Code, the undersigned registered qualified voters of the 1st Supervisor District of Calaveras County in the state of California hereby give notice that we are proponents of a recall petition and that we intend to seek your recall and removal from the office of Calaveras County Supervisor in District 1 of Calaveras County, California, and to demand election of a successor in that office. The grounds for the recall are as follows. Gary Tofinelli has demonstrated a blatant disregard for the welfare of Calaveras County, its citizens and businesses. He has chosen not to represent the members of his district equally and fairly, and to determent of citizens in the entire county. The results of his decision may include unrestrained illegal growing due to no enforcement, devastating lawsuits against the county entering bankruptcy, higher property and other taxes for county residences, underfunding of critical county services, loss of millions of dollars in Measure C revenue, firing of 22 or more county employees, including sheriff deputies, loss of Proposition 64 funds from the state, and fewer sheriff patrolling in the county and responding to emergencies. Mr. Tofinelli voted for a ban on cannabis despite having no plan or funds available for enforcement, and knowing hundreds in the county would lose their jobs and their businesses. Mr. Tofinelli is responsible for the loss of employment and income for hundreds of county citizens. the loss of 10 to 20 million per year in tax revenue and fees, and making the county less safe, and should not continue to serve as Calaveras County Supervisor. The printed names, signatures, and residences, addresses, and proponents are as follows: John Ertl, Bonnie Newman, George Fry, Sharon Romano, Myra A. Sandoval, Sylvia Edson, Phyllis Diane Helitis, M. Scott Helitis, Marjorie Kellis, Kimberly Farnham, Lawrence Farnham, Jennifer Sanders Meetger, Deborah Fadala, Richard Fadala, Kathy Cothran, Joan M. Tanner Wilson, Raymond Smith, Bill Wilson, Stacy Fairchild, Lisa Gage, Clifford Edson, Anna Stepp, Jessica Clofine, Michael Kitaka. Please see me after the meeting for these papers.
I'll see you right now. I'll come up and get it, okay?
Sorry. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Board. Bill Wilson, District 1. A couple of weeks ago, 3 of you voted to ban commercial cannabis in Calaveras County, putting out over 200 people that have been permitted and another 300 to 400 people that are still awaiting for their permits. This goes in definite reversal of what the state has done. The state passed commercial cannabis, they passed medical cannabis regulation. It's been legal for 20 years, gentlemen. Prop 215, Senate Bill 420. We were growing here for 17 years. Some have been growing for 20 years with Prop 215 in this county. The sheriff, when we came here, told us, keep your plants under 99, keep a 6-foot fence around your garden. Keep the gate locked, keep children out. It was posted on a website that the county produced. You 3 gentlemen have taken and gone back to 1937 with a ban that the federal government with $11 trillion has not been able to enforce. I wonder which one of the 3 of you are in the pockets of the cartels? Which one of you are taking payoffs from somebody to keep this illegal in this county? You know you're not going to stop it. You've tried to force it inside. You've heard that that's going to cause mold problems. Mr. Mills says it's going to cause fire problems. You're going to have people plugging grow lights into 15-watt outlets, and it's going to be a 1,000-watt LED bulb or high-intensity HDL bulb. You never know. You're going to have fires, you're going to have mold, you're going to have problems. All because the 3 of you came into office with your head up your respective posteriors and decided you were going to ban come heck or high water, and you have. Thank you. You have made this county a disaster area. You are right, Mr. Mills. It's an environmental disaster. Those are the people that are out there now, not inspected gardens, not regulated gardens, only black market, cartel, illegal grows.
Chair, can we take a 5-minute break so I get something to eat?
How many more people wish to speak? Is there any in the hallways? There's a bunch out there? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Oh. Okay, thank you. What?
Okay. Okay, we are back, and I just was pointed out it's 1 o'clock, and our board clerk needs to have a lunch break, so we're going to go to lunch from till 2:30. We'll return back at 2:30 from lunch.